12:30 on Monday, June 2nd. We are in day 5 of the Maxwell Anderson trial. He is charged in the death and dismemberment of 19-year-old Sade Robinson. This is the 5th day of the trial, the 4th day of testimony. So far today, we have heard from 3 witnesses. One is Pete Warbington, who was the downstairs tenant living in that house on South 39th Street in Milwaukee. And he lived down, Maxwell Anderson was his landlord. We also heard from Dr. Lauren Decker, the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, who performed the autopsy and tried to determine the cause of death. An unusual autopsy because she literally had to evaluate her body part by body part rather than having a full body. There are still parts of Sade Robinson that have never been recovered. And we also heard from a Milwaukee police detective who has testified now twice in this trial. And I once again apologize. I'm going to have to get a chance to go back and review the testimony to understand the pronunciation of his name, but it is John Guillot. He's a detective for the police department. He was talking about some of the movements of Maxwell Anderson, and I admit was in conversations at that time, I believe they were talking about the movements on the day of his arrest, but that is something I will have to review when I get the chance. I'm actually going to try to look at some of this. We have a transcript of that testimony now. Well, we'll come back to that in a little while. It has been a long trial so far, and we knew it was going to be. We knew that this was going to be something that would last potentially a couple of weeks. The state is still presenting its case in chief, which means they are still calling witnesses from their list of more than 200 potential witnesses. So far, we have heard from 41 witnesses, 36 different individuals, because 5 of them have been called to the stand twice so far. Many of them, most of them, are detectives, officers, law enforcement agents of some sort. We have heard from a handful of civilians, including today hearing from that tenant who lived downstairs in Maxwell Anderson's place, Pete Warbington. Over the course of those 5 days, we've gotten a picture of what law enforcement, what prosecutors know about the movements of Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson the night this occurred. And on Friday, we particularly had a lot of evidence that was presented, visual evidence, surveillance video showing what appears to have been Maxwell Anderson. What the state attests was indeed Maxwell Anderson leaving the scene of the car fire on the north side of Milwaukee, walking to a bus stop. This image right here, I think, is really telling, because if you look at where the mouse cursor is there, right on that white building, just below that, you see a human figure with what looks like a backpack, that little black silhouette. If you look far to the right on your screen there, you see a little orange dot. That is the beginning of a flame, and prosecutors say that was the car after it had just been lit on fire, and that figure that's walking is walking away the opposite direction, like it is, you know, their suggestion is that that's whoever set the fire is now walking away from it. We've seen we saw a lot of other video evidence presented of that same figure then, and it was so interesting is this image, you go, where did this picture come from? This is a camera on a Milwaukee County transit bus that just happened to be going by at that time. Milwaukee MCTS buses have something like 14 video cameras that are a part of their constant operation. And so as this was passing by, it captures this image. As it continued on past, we could see a better shot of that same person. You see it here. That is that same person with the backpack from now a rear-facing camera on the same MCTS bus, as this person appears to be walking away from the car that is about to be engulfed in flames. That same individual is then tracked down several blocks as they walk, I believe, down Walnut Street. There's the shot on Walnut Street. Producer doing a fantastic job of keeping up with what I'm talking about here, because that is what police say was Maxwell Anderson, prosecutors say, walking past this railroad bridge. That railroad bridge is just to the north of a playground where some of Sade Robinson's remains were ultimately found. This individual with the backpack loaded with something, we don't know what it is, continues to walk westbound and eventually makes his way all the way to, I believe it was 35th 5th Street. I think that's right, because I think he comes back to 35th and Lisbon and ends up at a bus stop. And there is the person right next to the person on the left. You see there's a person in the red pants, not him. The other one is standing there. That is the same individual, prosecutors say, that you've seen in the other images, with the backpack, the tan straps, the hood over his head. And then that person is then seen on video boarding a Milwaukee County Transit bus. Now we get a better look at his face. You see the face right there? Prosecutors said they believe that is Maxwell Anderson. It is who all of us probably recognize from photographs that have been shown since this incident. Images similar to this of a person who was on a county transit bus. And there are other images from these cameras that were presented as well. But he rides this bus, they say, from 35th and Lisbon on the north side all the way down 35th Street down to the south side of Milwaukee, and gets off the bus 4 or 5 blocks from Maxwell Anderson's home. And they say the direction that this person, who they believe is Maxwell Anderson, is walking is the direction you would go to take the shortest route to Maxwell Anderson's home. So that was really key evidence last week. We get that visual evidence of his movements, which raises the question, if Maxwell Anderson had nothing to do with this, what was he doing all the way up on the north side of Milwaukee, right in the vicinity of the fire that was set to the car owned by Sade Robinson? That is certainly some pretty strong evidence in favor of the state's case that it was Maxwell Anderson who disposed of her body and then tried to burn her car to cover up the crime. However, today we get sort of a different picture. Today so far seems to be some evidence that even though they were state witnesses that were called, these are witnesses that had some information that seemed to be helpful to the defense. And we'll start first with Pete Warbington. Pete Warbington was Maxwell Anderson's tenant on that address on the south side of Milwaukee, and he lived there for a couple of years. He said he knew Max Anderson's father way back when they were kids. He played Little League. Maxwell Anderson's dad was his Little League coach. Pete Warbington left Wisconsin, lived in Texas, he said, for about 18 years. And when he came back, he needed a place to stay. He saw there was a room for rent. I think he said it was on Facebook, but he saw it advertised online. He recognized Maxwell Anderson. They had known each other when they were younger, so he said, I'll take it. The rent was cheap. He said it was about $1,000 a month. And it seemed to be a good fit for him. So he lived there for a couple of years. Then you start to think, well, maybe these guys are good buddies. Maybe this is a close friend who's covering for his pal. But if you listen to the testimony of Pete Warbington, he does not seem to be a particular fan of Maxwell Anderson. He talked about him being a difficult person to have as a landlord. He had a lot of complaints. He was not shy about lodging those complaints, whether it was through phone calls or text messages. And he said at one point he considered Maxwell Anderson to be a, quote, insufferable landlord, end quote. That prompted the defense attorney Tony Cotton to intervene and object, saying it was character testimony, which is not allowed in this particular case. Before the judge could even rule on that, the prosecution backed down and said, I'll ask another more direct question. But as I've said many times, the jury heard that. We all heard it. It didn't sound much like Pete Warbington is a real big fan of Maxwell Anderson. On the other hand, he did say what the defense hinted to in the opening statements, and that is that Pete Warbington, the downstairs neighbor, was a light sleeper. He heard everything. He heard footsteps upstairs. He complained when he heard too much noise. He would hear Maxwell Anderson using power tools all the time and working on all sorts of projects. And he would complain about the level of noise he heard. But he said if something was happening upstairs with power tools, he would have definitely heard it. It would have woken him up, and he probably would have complained. But on the night of April 1st, leading into the morning of April 2nd, Pete Warbington insists he heard nothing until about 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, when it was either April 2nd, 3rd, somewhere in between there and April 4th, when the arrest occurred, that he remembers hearing someone bringing, he thought it was Maxwell Anderson, bringing a heavy suitcase down the stairs. He doesn't know for sure that it was a suitcase. That's what it sounded like. He never looked outside to see. He never asked Anderson about it. But he said at around 5:30 in the morning, somewhere between April 1st and April 4th, early in the week of April 1st or the 5th, he heard this heavy suitcase or something like it coming down the stairs. But he says he never heard screaming, he never heard crying, he never heard a struggle. He didn't hear any kind of power tools that would have been used at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, which is around the time that investigators have said they believe Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson were there in the house. Pete Worthington is saying, if there was some sort of gruesome murder happening in the basement or upstairs, I definitely would have heard it, and I didn't hear it. We also know that prosecutors, police didn't find any evidence of that bloody crime scene. We did, though, get for the first time a glimpse inside Maxwell Anderson's home. And I'm going to show you first the exterior. That's from the front. That front door, Pete Worthington says, that's where he would go in. He was on the lower level, so that lower window, that would have been Pete's. In fact, he said that was his bedroom. Upstairs, that would have been Max Anderson's, where he would live, the landlord. That's where he lived, was upstairs. And that walking path leads around the side of the house through an open gate there. There's a side door. And Worthington said while he occasionally might have used it, that was mostly where Anderson went in and out of the house. You can actually see Pete Worthington there on the front porch. He said, yep, that's me standing on the porch, and that's the door that he would use most of the time. Again, inside there are stairs from that side door that lead up to the upstairs apartment where Maxwell Anderson lived, but we actually got a pretty better look at the basement. So let's take a look at some of those right now. Here is, you see the dryer with the door flipped open. Apparently there were 2 sets of washers and dryers down there. Pete Worthington said one was for Maxwell Anderson, one set was for him, but then at a certain point, one of those broke and Maxwell Anderson started using Pete's washer and dryer, so he stopped doing his laundry down there for the most part. But we also get to look at other things like, looks like a workbench. There's, it looks like to be an extension cord underneath. There's a big giant thing of dog food. He said the dogs would stay in the basement. That is Maxwell Anderson's dogs. In fact, he said it smelled down there. It would flood sometimes, and that sometimes his dogs would defecate in the basement, and Pete Worthington would complain about that. Here's a workbench with tools, the kind of things you would expect to see in a basement, but nothing that indicates any particular struggle or crime has occurred. Similar here, another view of the workbench and some of the tools. There's a heavy bag for you know, like a punching bag there, that Everlast bag. Back upstairs, you can see there's a gate that is open. That apparently became significant because the hinge on that gate was apparently very loud, and Pete said he could hear that when he would go in and out of it sometimes. There was other testimony, though, that I wasn't really clear of the relevance to it. There's a light you can probably, well, it's hard to see, it blends in, but in the tree there's a sort of a floodlight attached to the tree that was apparently on a motion sensor, and Pete Worthington said that, you know, he doesn't know about the power source or anything, but he believes that was a motion sensor light. That may come into play later when the state tries to establish who was home at a given time. Was it just Pete setting that off? Was that, in fact, Maxwell Anderson? We don't exactly know how they're going to play that. We know they asked a lot of questions about it. There's another view of the side door of the house. But again, these are some of the things we've heard about so far today from that neighbor. The biggest, probably most helpful thing to the defense is that he didn't hear a struggle. He didn't hear power tools being used. He didn't hear anyone screaming. And he says he's the kind of light sleeper. He absolutely would have heard that if something like that had occurred. The state did follow up with a question, by the way, and said, was Maxwell Anderson aware that you were a light sleeper? And he said, absolutely. I complained about that a number of times. The suggestion there seems to be that if Anderson knew that he was a light sleeper, he might have taken extra precautions to do whatever he was doing extra quietly. That's an implication. They didn't say that, but that seems to be maybe what the suggestion was. Next, we have Dr. Lauren Decker. Dr. Decker, Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, was there to talk about the autopsy. And I'm going to take a break. We'll talk a little bit more about what Dr. Decker had to say and what she couldn't say. We'll do that right after this break.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson back with you here from the Wisconsin Live Desk. It's 12:46. The court is in recess. The Milwaukee County Safety Building 6th floor judge Laura Crivello presiding over the trial of Maxwell Anderson, who is charged in the homicide, the death and dismemberment of 19-year-old Sade Robinson. Defense attorney Tony Cotton, lead prosecutor Ian Vance Curzan, they're all on break right now for the morning into the afternoon. We'll take you back there about 1:45 when they're expected to resume testimony. We are now more than 40 witnesses into this trial. The state is still presenting its case in chief. In just a little bit, we're going to be joined by Fox 6's Aaron Maben, who has been at the courthouse listening to testimony. We also have this afternoon, in about 30 minutes, we will hear from Julius Kim of the law firm Kim and Lavoie. He is a criminal defense attorney and former state prosecutor who will give us his impressions of what we've heard so far in the case, and particularly some of the new things we have heard about today and the significance of those. And I'm sorry, Delaney, did you just say Aaron is dialing in? Oh, he's in. He's ready to go. I just got to punch him up. He's on live view 3. Okay, let's get him punched up here now. I'm going to put him, let's see, get this in the right place. Make sure we've got him. I do see that Aaron is there. I'm going to bring up Aaron and welcome him back to the Wisconsin Live Desk. Aaron, you're outside the Milwaukee County Safety Building. Thanks for coming back on with us.
Possibly yelling, talking to some people who are out of frame. About 1, 2, 3, 4, a dozen or so Sade Robinson supporters just left the safety building here. They crossed the street. They're going to head to lunch right now, so they're getting in their cars. And I was talking to them a few minutes ago, and I said, what are you really feeling right now? And a woman who has been here for a number of days inside the courtroom, I took some notes. She said she definitely thinks he's guilty, but just have an understanding that she is a supporter of Sade Robinson. She said she feels that there's a lot of evidence that pinpoints Maxwell Anderson to this situation. She highlighted the surveillance video that was seen. And I said, what did you really feel today inside the courtroom when we were looking at those images of her severed leg, her torso that washed ashore? And she said it was sad and it was scary. Let's move now to the man, 34-year-old Pete Warbington, who took the stand first today. He was a tenant in Maxwell Anderson's home, and he described moving in there and described Maxwell Anderson as an insufferable landlord. The defense shot that down and objected to that testimony. And I said, what did you think of that man, Pete Warbington? And she said to me, I thought he was very truthful. He told everything he knew, thought he was truthful, and she said she appreciated that Warbington did not talk about, a date for sure. Warbington a number of times said, I don't know exactly when I heard that suitcase coming down the stairs. I know the time, but I just don't know that exact date. And she thought that that was very truthful. So that was from a young woman named Kiana, who was inside the courtroom all morning long. She's sitting not far behind the family of Sade Robinson, but has no relation. But that, Brian, just kind of paints a picture of what some people, one person, is feeling after this morning's testimony. She was there at 8:45 this morning when things kicked off, and she heard all that testimony. I did talk to another woman named LaQuanda, who was outside the courtroom a few days ago, outside the courthouse a few days ago. And when I saw her today, meeting her once again, I said, how's today been for you? It's been a difficult day for her. She did mention that when that torso was shown of Sade Robinson, she had to leave the courtroom. And I noticed that she left the courtroom and she was leaning down quite a bit during that testimony too. And she did tell me that it was too difficult. So those are just two stories of what's happening inside the courtroom and what people are feeling during this gruesome testimony, and as we learn more from the state as they bring their witnesses to the stand, Brian.
Aaron, you've been there for many days now, and this is one of those trials where it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I know that you've had supporters from both families that are in the courtroom at various times. What do you notice about them after, there are moments of really gruesome testimony. There are things that are really difficult, but it's just a long process. And how are they holding up in terms of wading through all of this testimony?
I find myself constantly scanning the courtroom through the critical moments, but also the moments that maybe aren't, filled with a lot of testimony. There are things that appear to be going slower, right? So let's start with Maxwell Anderson's father and mother. I just find myself focusing on them because of where they're seated right behind their son. It's just easy for me to clearly see. They're very stoic. They're doing a lot of looking at the screen, looking at Maxwell Anderson. There's a lot of nodding that seems to be coming from Maxwell Anderson's mother when Anthony Cotton stands up and questions, does that cross-examination, Brian. So it seems like they are looking up a little bit more. Then there's Sade Robinson's mother, who I see sort of looking down quite a bit during this testimony. And I attribute that to be because there have been some gruesome moments when photographs are put on the screen, and there are other people on the Robinson side or on the state side looking down too. Let's talk about the jury right now, because I find myself really fixated on them. They needed a break after Pete Warbington's testimony today. It was a long testimony. It was really detailed. They had to take a break. I mean, when the judge said, "Yeah, you guys are excused," there was one juror who popped up right away and headed to the jury room, likely to maybe just get up and stretch and maybe do some other things back in that jury room too. So it is a marathon. People do need to get up and moving. I will say in the gallery area, it appears that, excuse me, sir, I have a question. I'm live right now. You've been in the gallery. We're trying to get some understanding of what people are feeling in the gallery. Can I maybe ask you one or two questions? Do you have a moment for that?
I mean, I don't feel comfortable being on camera.
Okay, so you're not on camera right now. We're talking about how this is a marathon. What did you feel during that testimony right now, or this morning?
I just feel very sorry for the family. And
Okay.
I hope that they heal.
Okay.
And the defendant should be punished to the fullest extent of the law, I think.
So you feel sorry for the family right now. You hope that they heal. You feel the defendant should be punished. What has brought you out these number of days, sir?
I'm very interested in the legal system. I also want to show support to the family members.
Okay.
But I also think the defendant should be, if he's found guilty, he should be punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Yeah.
The penal code. I think life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
And before I let you go, there were some difficult images inside of the courtroom, not only last week, but also this week too. What did you make of those difficult images?
Disgusted, horrified.
Disgusted, horrified.
And I don't care what happens to that defendant.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to have that moment right there. We had someone who was in the gallery with us. I'd noticed him as he was walking this way. He swung behind me. I just wanted to stop him, hopefully to get, an interview with him. He wanted to stay off camera. I allowed that to happen. He said he was sick and disgusted by the images that were just shown, but he wanted to be here to support the family of Sade Robinson. I did notice him because he's, Brian, sitting behind Maxwell Anderson's family. So he just, maybe just wanted to sit there just to get a really good look at what's happening inside of the courtroom.
I have to say,
right
Aaron,
now.
I'm gonna tell everybody who's watching here right now, Wisconsin Broadcasters Association, was it just live reporter? What was the award you won this year?
Yeah, best live on scene reporter.
Best live on, and that is why right there. I love the courage to just say in a moment, I know I'm live, but here's a face I recognize. Let's talk to that person. And even though he was off camera, you got a real sense from what he's feeling. I'm sure that a lot of people would have a little discomfort from standing in front of the camera with the subject matter here. But I love that really raw moment right there. And I think it was interesting to hear him say, if he's guilty, he should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. What I noticed he didn't say was, I've watched this and he is guilty as can be, because there is some question here, and there's certainly, I don't mean to say, I'm sure there's some people who look at this and say there's no question at all. They've seen it, they know enough. But the defense has raised some doubts. The question is it reasonable doubt? And we'll know that when the jury finally has this case. we're going to talk to a defense expert in a little bit who's going to tell us, I'm sure, that he sees all sorts of holes in this. But in terms of just, that's what I picked up on from that was, if he's guilty, he should be. He didn't say, this guy's 100% guilty and it's clear as day. I thought it was an interesting comment.
And I think I've heard that from a number of people. There are really smart people who are in the courtroom right now, from the public, who know the family, who knew Sade Robinson. They are very, very smart people, know Maxwell Anderson. And, you know, they're using a lot of that language, just understanding, Brian, that this is something that the state has to prove. And ultimately, this is going to be in the jury's hands. And the state has to prove that Maxwell Anderson did this, not just the homicide, the dismemberment, trying to hide a corpse, but also setting Sade Robinson's car on fire. So a lot of that language is happening inside and outside of the courthouse, either in the hallway or like we just saw out here, Brian.
Has the state given any indication how far along they are in their presentation? Like, are they within a day or two of wrapping up? Do we have any sense of that at all right now?
There's no sense of that right now. We're all very curious because, as you mentioned earlier, this has been a marathon of a situation, but the defense is moving very quickly. I mean, we have seen the scenes, all the different scenes where Sade Robinson's limbs turned up. We saw the car fire, we saw the arson. Today we have seen the inside of the home for the first time, and now we're getting to Maxwell Anderson's places of employment. So we have gone through the timeline, we have gone through the summary. It's interesting to see who else is going to take the stand. We are on, this critical testimony still. There are, more than 200 people who could be called. That's likely not going to be happening, but there are those questions right now because we had that long witness list. Who could come next, and when does the state feel they have proved their point?
Well, obviously there's more to be determined with regard to that. I know you'll be in the courtroom this afternoon listening to testimony. We appreciate your time here, obviously during this lunch recess, and we'll let you get back to the courtroom to get caught up on what's happening this afternoon. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right, Aaron Mabin reporting live outside the Milwaukee County Safety Building. It is just about 1 o'clock. We're coming up on 1 o'clock. There's another 45 minutes to go until the court is going to resume testimony this afternoon. 3 witnesses this morning, probably the slowest pace in terms of number of witnesses that we have seen throughout the duration of this trial. I'm going to take you through some of what we had, the highlights, I think, of what we have heard so far, and that will take us up to 1:15 when we expect to be joined by Julius Kim of Kim and Lavoie, a criminal defense attorney, criminal defense expert, also a former state prosecutor who knows the ins and outs of high-profile trials, including homicide trials just like this one. Well, maybe there's nothing that's just like this one, but he certainly has some expertise he can lend. He'll give us his analysis on what we've heard so far. We'll take a break. When we come back, I'm going to walk you through how we got here, what we've heard so far, and get you set up to hear from Julius Kim right after this.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson here with you from the Wisconsin Live Desk on Monday afternoon. It is 1:02 p.m. Monday, June 2nd. This is day 5 of the Maxwell Anderson trial, day 4 of testimony. He is, of course, charged with the death and dismemberment of 19-year-old Sade Robinson. That case is taking place, the trial taking place at the Milwaukee County Safety Building downtown on the 6th floor in the courtroom of Judge Laura Gravello. The prosecutors are Ian Vance Curzan and Megan Newport. The defense attorneys Tony Cotton and Jason Findling, of course, the defendant, Maxwell Anderson. It is day 5 of the trial, and we have heard from 41 witnesses so far. 5 of them were recalled witnesses, so 36 different individuals. A lot of sheriffs and police detectives. This has been a huge case that took tremendous resources from homicide units in both the County Sheriff's Office and the Milwaukee Police Department. We've heard from a handful of civilians as well. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes getting you up to speed. If you're just tuning in, if you've missed some things along the way, this is going to be your Cliff Notes. We're going to tell you what's happened so far in this trial. First of all, to go back to the very beginning, the allegations that Maxwell Anderson went out on a first date with Sade Robinson, went back with her after visiting 2 local bars, went back to his place where they stayed for a few hours. He killed and dismembered her somewhere, we don't know where, that he ultimately drove her car down to the Milwaukee lakefront, deposited many of her dismembered body parts into Lake Michigan and along the area in Warnermount Park in Cudahy, then drove her car up to the north side of Milwaukee, set it ablaze to try to cover up that crime, and rode a bus back to his apartment. He eventually just went back to his routine and ended up back working as a bartender at Victor's nightclub, which is where police saw him just a short time before he was arrested on April 4th. To get you to where we are now in terms of testimony, we have heard from the state in its opening statement say, you will never hear or see a bloody crime scene. There's going to be no testimony of an obvious bloody crime scene that you would expect in a case like this, but that they have mountains of digital evidence. They have surveillance video. They have cell phone pings. They have witness testimony that places Maxwell Anderson in places along this route that indicate he was near where the body parts were found. He was with Sade Robinson, the last person to see her alive, that he was the one who walked away from the car just as it was set ablaze. That is the evidence they are presenting. The defense says, yeah, you're right, you're not going to hear any testimony or see anything about a bloody crime scene because there isn't one that Maxwell Anderson was a part of. They say there's no murder weapon, there's no method, we don't know how she was killed, where she was killed, and most importantly, the defense says we don't know by whom she was killed. Testimony started on Wednesday of last week with a civilian who found the leg in Warnermount Park, the law enforcement officers who responded, and they talked about the condition of that leg, that it looked like it had been recently deposited there. We saw the smashed gate that leads down to the water department pump house in Cudahy that's right near where the leg was discovered along Lake Michigan. And we know there was a car part found near that gate that prosecutors say belongs to Sade Robinson's car, which was later found burned on the north side of Milwaukee. They presented bags of evidence with some of those car parts that were left behind. We know that we heard from the leasing agent and building maintenance worker at Sade Robinson's apartment. They knew Sade had been expected to go on a date. She was excited to go on a date. They also said that she worked at Pizza Shuttle, and police presented evidence of Sade Robinson, video evidence, her leaving for work on April 1st, which is the last time she would be seen. Leaving for work and eventually leaving Pizza Shuttle at 5 o'clock, waving goodbye to a coworker and heading off to her date with Maxwell Anderson. On day 2, we heard from Detective Nora Donegan, formerly Officer Nora Burlow, who responded to do a welfare check on Sade Robinson after she'd been reported missing. She went to that apartment to look for her. Coworkers described her as a kind person, someone who was very reliable, would always show up to work. They became concerned when she didn't show up for her shift at Pizza Shuttle the day after, which was on April 2nd. We heard from other officers about the movements of Sade Robinson, and also a friend, a woman named Elena Fisher, who described herself as Sade Robinson's best friend. She shared her Life 360 data. That is a location app that lets you see where a friend or a family member is going. She shared some of those screenshots of Sade Robinson's locations with law enforcement, and ultimately police were able to get digital records that tracked her movements the night this happened. Her phone ultimately was last detected near Warnermount Park when the phone died about 4 o'clock in the morning. We heard from a Milwaukee Fire Department captain and members of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau who talked about the car having been set on fire. This car was discovered at 29th and Lisbon on the north side, the opposite side of town from where Maxwell Anderson lives, opposite side of town from where the leg was found. But that car fire, they said, was determined to have been intentionally set by what appeared to be something like lighter fluid and an open flame. Inside the car, in the trunk, which was still intact even after the fire, they found clothing that matches what they say Sade Robinson was wearing the day before her passing, including that date with Maxwell Anderson. On day 4, one of the key things from that, the state said, was the position they found the seat of the car in. The driver's seat was found 20 inches back from the accelerator, and they said that that distance appeared to be consistent with someone taller than Sade Robinson, who was only about 5 feet tall. They said it was consistent with somewhat of Maxwell Anderson's height. We know that on day 4, we started to get a lot more in terms of what happened on the north side of Milwaukee near that car fire. There were human remains discovered within a couple of blocks of that car fire, and we got a lot of video of someone who appeared to match the description of Maxwell Anderson, a man with a hood and a backpack walking away from the fire scene, walking down several blocks past an area where ultimately some of Sade Robinson's remains would be found, and then getting on a bus and boarding it back to the south side of Milwaukee, getting off that bus within a few blocks of Maxwell Anderson's house. The images from the Milwaukee County Transit bus appear to match Maxwell Anderson's booking photo, and the prosecutors say it was positively identifying him as the person who set the fire to that car. The defense, of course, didn't concede that. The defense, in fact, said they would make no comment on whether or not that was showing Maxwell Anderson. We do know, though, that the defense said at one point that a person can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They brought that up during questioning of potential jurors on day 1. Is it possible to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Have you ever been in the wrong place at the wrong time? Seems they were looking for jurors who might nod along and go, yeah, that's happened, that can happen, because that's part of the case they appear to be making is, if that's Maxwell Anderson on all those videos near the car fire and hopping on the bus and heading back home, well, there's no proof he did it, no proof he killed anyone, he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's a suggestion they appear to be making. Today, the defense got some stronger evidence perhaps in their favor, maybe the strongest yet for their case, which is Maxwell Anderson's tenant, Pete Warbington. So a man who was a witness who was full of color. He was interesting. He shot from the hip. He often interrupted, not intentionally, but was just quick to answer questions to the point that the judge said, can you just take a beat and answer more slowly so our court reporter can get this down? Well, Pete Warbington said he had known Maxwell Anderson since they were younger because his dad, Maxwell Anderson's dad, had coached his Little League team. Pete Warbington went away for about 18 years, came back, needed an apartment for rent. Maxwell Anderson had one listed, so he became his tenant. But Pete Warbington also pointed out he didn't really like Maxwell Anderson all that well, and they'd had a bit of a falling out. He called him an insufferable landlord, said that he made a lot of noise, he would have friends over and have parties until 2 or 3 in the morning, and he was a really light sleeper, so he would complain about some of that noise, and then after a while he just had to kind of put up with it. But the defense picked up on Pete Warbington being a light sleeper, because on the night of April 1st into the morning of April 2nd, when prosecutors say Maxwell Anderson had Sade Robinson there at his home, Pete Warbington says he slept right through it, didn't hear a thing, and he would have certainly woken up if there had been screaming or crying or a struggle or saws cutting someone's body. He said he didn't hear anything like that. He only heard either that morning or the following morning, or maybe the morning after. He says he can't remember the date. He says he's been consistent about that from the beginning, but at some point around 5:30 in the morning, one of those days, he remembers hearing what sounded like Maxwell Anderson dragging a heavy suitcase down the stairs. He never looked to see what it looked like. He never asked Maxwell Anderson about it, but that's what he described. He just couldn't pinpoint the day he heard that. He knows it was sometime between April 1st and when ultimately a search warrant was executed on the house after Maxwell Anderson's arrest. And Anderson was arrested on April 4th. We heard today from Detective John Galat of the Milwaukee Police Department, who says once they knew that that was the man they wanted to arrest for this crime, or that they suspected was a person of interest in this case, they found him at Victor's, where he worked as a bartender. They did some surveillance on his vehicle. They eventually followed him to the south side of Milwaukee and ultimately performed a traffic stop and arrested him. So that is where he was taken into custody and has remained ever since. It's about 1:12 right now. In a couple of minutes, we are going to have Julius Kim of the law firm Kim and Lavoie, who will join us. I don't believe we have him on the line just yet, but when we do, we will bring him in to talk about the testimony we've heard today and his thoughts on where this case might be going. And we'll try to connect with him shortly. We'll take a break right now here.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Welcome back to the Live Desk. Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson here. We are on the lunch recess on Monday, June 2nd, day 5 of the trial of Maxwell Anderson, of course charged with the death and dismemberment of 19-year-old Sade Robinson on April 1st of 2024. We are waiting for Julius Kim of Kim and Lavoie to join us via Zoom. He has not tuned in just yet, but I am told I will be actually, Cale, if you're listening to me right now, I did send him the link. I sent it earlier today. Okay, we've got him. We do have him. Oh, hey, there. Okay, so I think we've got him. Let's make sure I've got all the buttons punched up right and see if I can bring Julius into our. Here we go. Let's see if I can get him in set up. He is on router 1. He is on router 1. Julius Kim, I think I see you there. I am going to see if I can get your volume turned up. I see you. You look nice and clear. Can you hear me?
Thanks. I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Hey, Julius Kim, Kim and Lavoie, you've been helping us out here at Fox 6 News quite a bit here the last week plus as we've taken everyone through this trial of Maxwell Anderson. Julius Kim is a criminal defense lawyer and a former state prosecutor, so you have unique insights into this process, and you've certainly been involved in some high-profile cases, so I know you are familiar with what is happening in the courtroom. You've been watching this case closely. I want to start with today's testimony. If you had a chance to listen to what was going on, particularly the testimony of the tenant, Pete Worthington. What stood out to you about that? Any surprises there, or what do you think was maybe the most impactful thing he had to say?
I think the most impactful thing that he had to say today had to do with the fact that he didn't hear anything. It was very, very clear through the testimony that Mr. Worthington is a light sleeper. He went about making sure that he let everyone know that he made lots of complaints to Mr. Anderson about the fact that Mr. Anderson would make a lot of noise during the course of his stay there. But what was really, really interesting was that on the night of this particular incident, the tenant said that he didn't hear anything. He did say that he heard Maxwell Anderson seem to be moving a suitcase or something else around, but he was adamant that that was around 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And that doesn't fit the state's timeline.
Well, I think that's one of the things that seems so interesting to me here is that the state really doesn't have a particular timeline when it comes to when or where this actual crime, the actual homicide, occurred. We obviously know that there's the dismemberment and the scattering of these body parts, and they have presented a lot of evidence that seems to indicate he was potentially, maybe he was the one driving the car that ran through the gate where the leg was found. Maybe he's the one who's walking away from the burned out car on the north side. But is that part of the struggle here for the prosecution, is they don't really have a theory of exactly when or where Sade Robinson was killed, and in fact, how she was killed?
Yes, that's a big problem for the state. Now, the state here is trying to thread a very, very small needle, and they don't have a lot of room for error in this particular case. And what we don't have so far from the state is a precise theory in terms of where, when, how Sade Robinson was killed. And so that's going to be a big, big problem here. I do think the state's going to eventually produce some evidence that shows that Sade Robinson was inside Maxwell Anderson's unit, his apartment. And so that is going to answer some things, but it's not going to tell the whole story.
I wonder, Julie, what is the significance of the state calling Pete Worthington as a witness? Because we knew from the opening statements that the defense planned to call him. The defense was going to point out that he didn't hear anything. He didn't hear any struggle. So we said, this is the defense star witness that's coming. But the state called him today. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that's classic trial strategy. I thought it was a good move on behalf of the state. Oftentimes, one side or the other may go ahead and call a witness that they perceive to be not so helpful to them, maybe more helpful to the other side in advance, if they have the opportunity to do that. And the state had an opportunity to call this tenant first, and they took advantage of that. And that's just to take some of the wind out of the sails of the witness. It also is the state trying to show that they don't have anything to hide. They're trying to get to the truth here. And it also gives the state an opportunity to do a little bit of damage control, because they get the opportunity to ask these questions of this witness first and perhaps present his testimony in a way that is not so damaging to them.
I'm curious, as an attorney, when you have a witness like Pete Worthington, because he was pretty loose with what he was saying. He was someone who was willing to talk over people, to talk quickly, and he seemed to be very comfortable, very casual, and just sharing his experience, telling it like it is. Can that be a little bit of a wild card as an attorney when you're a little bit concerned that, especially if the other side called him, is he going to say some things I'm not ready for that we don't want him to say?
Yeah, it cuts both ways. So far in this trial, we've seen just a plethora of witnesses that are just kind of like your classic. You couldn't have more kind of stereotypical witnesses for people that are being called, from the two gentlemen that found the body part by the lake to other witnesses. And Mr. Worthington's one of those witnesses. And yes, he kind of went on, but you could really tell what his character was like. He, in a strange way, he appeared more sincere by being the way he was. And as a trial lawyer, you're trying to manage him not saying too much and going off on tangents, but also letting him do that a little bit so that the jurors can build his credibility in front of the jurors a little bit more.
I'm wondering, how rare is it? Because you really step back for a minute and think about, what do we have in this case? How rare is it to have a case where you have clearly a homicide? I mean, her parts were dismembered. Sade Robinson didn't do this to herself. This wasn't an accident. On the other hand, we have absolutely no way to know how she died, where she died, what kind of weapon was used. That does not seem like a very common set of circumstances.
It's not. And it's not too often that you have a homicide case where there isn't an actual body like this found intact in one piece. These cases are rare. That's why we're talking about it right now, quite frankly. But it's not impossible to do. It's not impossible to prove, because ultimately what the state is trying to do is they're trying to build this case, and they're trying to close in the walls around Mr. Anderson, so that you as a juror or as an observer of this trial are left with the question, if he didn't do this, then who could have? There was no one else that could have done this. And again, they're not required to prove the case beyond any doubt. They're required to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And is it reasonable to believe that Mr. Robinson was a person, or Mr. Anderson was a person who did this under all the circumstances and facts in front of the jury?
So we haven't talked to you, or at least I haven't talked to you since Friday, when the all of that testimony came out, the surveillance video and the snapshots, the things that were showing what appears to be Maxwell Anderson. Right there in the same image, you see the shadowy figure right in front of the white building with the backpack on and the little flicker of a flame that's just starting in the car. And then they sort of detailed the movements all the way to getting on the county bus, where there are much more clear images of who that person is, and then riding the bus all the way down to the south side within a few blocks of his home. How important is that testimony for the prosecution to put him at the scene of the car fire, which we know was Sade Robinson's car?
I think it was very, very strong evidence, and I don't think it was a mistake that they kind of ended the testimony for the week using that evidence, because it was the first time that a witness and testimony has produced someone saying that is Maxwell Anderson, that he was positively identified as a person, and it's clear as day from the video that they produced it at trial that that's Maxwell Anderson. And now they have Maxwell Anderson walking away from Sade Robinson's burning car. As to whether he set the fire or not, I'm not sure that's so clear or not. But they have him at a critical scene, the scene of Sade Robinson's car, with evidence being burned. That looks awfully damning. So I think that was a very strong point for the state.
And obviously that is where that questioning during voir dire came in of the, have you ever been at the wrong place at the wrong time? Is that what they're getting at that point?
I think so, because I think what this defense is trying to say is, listen, these things look bad. The defense knows that they're not really going to be able to get around the fact that Mr. Anderson was found next to Sade Robinson's burning car, walking away from it. And so they're going to have to come up with an alternate theory to say, listen, this isn't exactly what it looks like, okay? Because they don't have anyone saying that Maxwell Anderson was the one that lit that match, that actually killed Sade Robinson, that actually dismembered her. There's no direct evidence. Direct evidence meaning either a confession or someone with an eyewitness saying that they saw him do this. And so without that direct evidence, they're trying to say this looks awfully bad, but it doesn't mean that he did it.
When I first heard that Pete Warbington, who we thought was going to be this defense star witness, when I first heard him say, we go way back since we were kids, his dad coached my Little League team, I think, oh, well, maybe the state's going to attack that you're just covering for your buddy. But then he testifies to what an insufferable landlord he was, and that they'd had this falling out, and he didn't particularly seem very fond of Maxwell Anderson. I almost got the sense that worked against the state's case, because it added to the credibility of saying, even though I didn't like the guy, I'm telling you, I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. Worthington was kind of interesting, depending on how you're looking at him and his testimony, because I think that a lot of people are still wondering in the back of their minds whether he could have somehow been involved in this, especially given the close relationship that they had. And, part of what was going through my mind was, I wonder if he's trying to distance himself from Mr. Anderson so that no one is making this logical leap that, I wonder if they were in on this together at some point, which, who knows at this point in time, because the state hasn't produced any evidence to show otherwise. But that being said, I want to make it clear that the state's not suggesting that Mr. Worthington was involved in this, but that's why he was a crucial witness, because everyone knows there was one other person that we know for sure that was in that building that night, and that was him. And I think the state letting him kind of talk for a while gave the jury an opportunity to see that when you size this guy up, I don't think that he was the one that did it.
So the next witness today was from the medical examiner's office, Dr. Lauren Decker, and obviously that's really graphic stuff. It's difficult stuff for the gallery to see, but it's got to be introduced as evidence. But one of the questions I think a lot of us have had was, can we tell what was used to dismember the body? Was it a certain kind of tool? Is there something telling about the condition of those parts as to how they were separated? And she talked about, I believe, number one was the leg that was found in Warmount Park, that it appeared that the femur had been in some way crushed with tremendous blunt force. It didn't appear to be any evidence necessarily like a saw. It looked like the flesh had been cut with possibly a knife. And then the ankle, the foot that's found in the playground area, that it looked like that might have been just cut with, it was consistent with a knife, not a saw. Any significance to what she was saying about the way these parts may or may not have been removed from the body?
Yeah, it hit me as I was kind of cringing at certain parts of her testimony, quite honestly. And I've heard lots of this testimony and seen lots of this stuff in my career, but it gave you the sense of just how violent and how brutal the dismemberment was. And that, if you backtrack a little bit, then how violent and brutal the person who's doing the dismembering must be, because she's describing how in order for the body parts to be the way they were, there must have been either a snapping or a breaking of the femur, of the bone. And that takes kind of a violent act. It takes a lot of pressure in order to do something like that. Also, she was suggesting that while she can't say for sure exactly what implement was used to sever these body parts, she was suggesting that, at the very least, a sharp knife was used to sever and cut through tissue and muscle. And again, it just takes a certain kind of person to be able to do that. So I thought that her testimony it gave a credence to just how violent of an offense this was. If people think that Maxwell Anderson did this, it's certainly not painting him in a good light.
But from Tony Cotton's standpoint as a defense attorney, I thought he did a pretty impressive job of getting her to answer some questions in short succession that, if you work in the news world, makes a really nice, succinct soundbite. It's the kind of thing that sometimes you take. It's a thing that I do often. I'm here, I'm listening to hours of testimony, and I want to sum it up in a package that you can quickly digest. And he got 3 questions in a row. He said, but ultimately, while you determined this was a homicide, which means medically that someone else caused it, not that a particular person did it, he said, you've drawn no conclusion about who did it. She said, correct. Or where, correct. Or how, correct. And I thought that those 3 answers in a row really indicate a lot of the unanswered stuff that's going on here. That seemed like a pretty effective line of questioning from the defense.
Absolutely. That's the one thing going into this trial that Attorney Cotton knew, and that she couldn't answer those things. So I thought that he did a really good job of kind of setting her up for that, right? He was asking her a lot of different questions about her examination, how things are done, what information she has, and what information she doesn't have. But that was all a setup for those 3 questions that you just pointed out. She can't determine exactly how this was done and by whom or where. And that's really the crux of the case.
So there was also quite a bit of attention to sort of the area just outside the house, the side door versus the front door, a floodlight that might be motion sensitive. The state didn't exactly explain why it was asking those questions, but as someone who's schooled in these sorts of things, where do you think the state was going with that?
Yeah, I think that they were just trying to suggest that if people were coming in and out, that people could hear things, but also maybe not. Also make a conscious effort to be not to be heard. One of the things that the state asked the tenant was, "Do you think that Maxwell Anderson knew that you were a light sleeper?" And that was an important question. That was a question that they asked, I think, on redirect, and I think it was an important one for them to follow up with, because that suggests that Maxwell Anderson knew that he's got this tenant downstairs that wakes up at every little thing, and that if he was going to do anything, he's got to make sure that he's absolutely quiet so not to wake him up. So that, in other words, it's possible for this to have happened without the tenant actually waking up.
All right. Last thing I want to ask you about for today is this: we've covered a lot of ground from Warner Park all the way. We've gone through the car fire up on the north side, the bus ride all the way back down to the south side. We've now seen the inside of both Sade Robinson's apartment and Maxwell Anderson's. What's left to see? What do you think the state still has to hit here before they are ready to wrap up their case in chief?
Yeah, I think that they have to show clear evidence that Sade Robinson was inside Maxwell Anderson's apartment, because there's still that's a huge question that's still unanswered. Also, kind of left out there is this notion that the tenant downstairs also drove a Honda Civic, right? So, lots of things are going through people's minds as to, I wonder if some of the video that the state has suggested they have of cars coming and going from the Anderson residence, whether it could have been the tenant's car versus Robinson's car. So they still have some work to do. They still have to present evidence that Sade Robinson was actually with Maxwell Anderson at his residence. I still also think that they're going to have to present some more telephone evidence to suggest that as well, to shore up those things. They need to tighten up the screws on some of these things that they're trying to suggest.
if they can place Sade Robinson in the apartment, for instance, with these photographs we've heard that were mentioned at openings, that there are photographs from Maxwell Anderson's phone that appear to show Sade Robinson on his couch. And in fact, I believe the indication was that the photograph showed Maxwell Anderson's hand grabbing her right breast, which we also know later was one of the things that was cut off from the body. And there's also the removal of pants and underwear. We haven't seen any of that presented yet, but we know what was alluded to in opening statements. If they present that and put that there, is it possible for a jury to say, even though we don't know where or how this person was killed, there's no logical, reasonable explanation that anybody else could have done this considering the timeline? Is that possible? And is that what the state's going for here? Is they've got to eliminate any other possibility, even though they can't say directly that he did it?
Absolutely. I think that's why they're kind of saving that bit of evidence towards the end of their case, because they know that if they can show that Sade Robinson was actually in Maxwell Anderson's apartment, that does several things. Number one, it kind of neutralizes this whole notion that the tenant didn't hear anything. And so just because the tenant didn't hear anything, then no one must have been up there, because they're going to have evidence that people were in fact up there. So I think the argument is that, listen, he may be a light sleeper. He might say that he's a light sleeper, but clearly there were people in that apartment because they have photographic evidence. That photographic evidence also is important by its very nature as to what it's depicting. If it's depicting something, sexual in nature, for instance, I think that people are going to start drawing some conclusions as to what may have happened. Did this date turn into later some type of sexual act that went horribly wrong? And so I think that presenting Sade Robinson a photograph of her or photographs of her in Maxwell Anderson's apartment is going to do a lot for the state's case at this point.
Well, we still have a ways to go in this case, and we are not done having your analysis and expertise here, and so appreciative of all the time you spent with us, Julius. We'll have you back here tomorrow, same time, 1:15. Is that the plan?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, Julius Kim of Kim and Lavoie here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. And I just keep punching the wrong buttons left and right. But I am Brian Polson here. We're going to take a break, and we will give you a little more before we head back to the second half of this, or the second half of the day here. We'll do that right after this. Thank you, Julius.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
And welcome back. I am Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson at the Wisconsin Live Desk here on Monday, June 2nd, day 5 of the trial of Maxwell Anderson, who was charged with the death and dismemberment of 19-year-old Sade Robinson in April of last year. It has been another half day of some pretty difficult testimony, including autopsy photos that were shown to the gallery. They were shown to the jury, but of course the members of the gallery had to decide if they wanted to be in there to see some of that, because we're not just seeing a typical autopsy of a fully intact individual, but actually someone who was dismembered and whose autopsy was done quite literally in pieces. We are also more than 40 witnesses into this case. The state is continuing to present its case in chief, although today the state called at least one witness who was certain to be on the defense list, but preemptively, strategically perhaps, called Pete Warbington, a tenant of Maxwell Anderson in that house on 39th Street on the south side. They called Mr. Warbington to the stand to talk about what he heard, what he knew in the days leading up to, and of course on the night of the incident where Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson went on that date, and according to prosecutors, came back to his apartment to his house for a few hours. Anderson rented out the lower level of that duplex to Warbington, and Anderson lived on the upper level. And we've got some images that were shown in court today. I'm going to start with a picture of the house from the front side. That is the home that Anderson had listed for rent. Pete Warbington said he knew Maxwell Anderson from when they were kids because Maxwell Anderson's father had coached his Little League team. Warbington had moved away and lived in Texas for 18 years, said he came back, needed to get closer to his work in Milwaukee, saw that the lower unit was for rent, knew who Maxwell Anderson was. He said the price was right, $1,000 a month in rent, so he accepted it. You can see in this picture there's a person standing on the front porch right under that awning. That is Pete Warbington. He said he lived in the lower level, which used that front door. The front door did not have any access to the upper unit. That front window on the lower level, he said, was the window right into, I believe it was into his bedroom, or it was right on the other side of the door to the right, but it was right there toward the front of the unit. Now, we have some other photos of the side of the house, and I'll show you this one here. You see the side door. Warbington said that is a door that Maxwell Anderson would typically use to come and go from, although he did say once a week or so he would come out that door, maybe to take out the garbage or something like that, that Pete himself would. But he said typically that was the door Maxwell Anderson would use. He rarely used the front door. You see that gate that is open there. He said 9 times out of 10 that gate was just sitting wide open, but it did have a latch to latch shut. We're not really entirely certain of the significance of that at this point, but that's some of the questioning that came up. Here's another view of that front gate. By the way, this trailer that you see that's in the way, he says that was not there at the time of all of this. It has been added since, and these photographs were taken. But that is in front of that same gate. We saw the inside of the Anderson home. I'm going to show you this. These are the stairs that come in. If you go in the side door, these stairs lead up to the upper unit where Maxwell Anderson lived. And then there's a basement that was effectively a shared basement. This you see, not quite clear. If you did some woodworking, that hanging curtain may well have been just to control dust. Don't really know. But a lot of tools in the basement. There's a workbench. You can see what looks typically like the tools you might find in a basement. Here is another view of some of the things stored down there. The heavy bag, maybe for workouts or something like that. We did hear that Warbington say he didn't go down there very often, though. He said it flooded a lot, it was smelly, and that Maxwell Anderson often kept his dogs down there, and sometimes they would defecate in the basement, and Pete would complain about that. But he said he didn't go down there all that much, except to use the laundry. And I believe we have, let's see if I can find photos of the, there it is. Okay, you see the dryer back in the background there that is sitting wide open. Pete Warbington said there was in fact 2 sets of washers and dryers in the basement. One that was effectively there for Maxwell Anderson to use, his landlord, another that Pete would use. But he said at some point in the last couple of months, The washer broke on Maxwell Anderson's side, so he was finding Max's clothes in his washer and dryer all the time, and he had to keep rotating the clothes through. So he said after that he stopped using the washer and dryer and would just take the clothes to his mom's house to get them done. At least he said often he did that. Still not entirely sure the significance of that, but it seemed that Pete Worthington was saying, I don't really know much about that basement. I didn't go down there all that often. But what you can definitely tell from these photos is that there is no evidence of any obvious crime scene. If this is where Maxwell Anderson killed and dismembered Sade Robinson, it doesn't appear that there's any obvious remnants of that, and we haven't heard anything from law enforcement that they found any kind of bloody crime scene or DNA down here. But this is a look inside the home where Maxwell Anderson allegedly had Sade Robinson in the hours after her death, or in the hours after that first date, I should say. So that was probably the key witness today, was Pete Worthington. We also heard from Dr. Lauren Decker, who is a Milwaukee County medical examiner. Let me pop out of that. I'm just pressing up all the wrong buttons today. There we go. Get me back up there. Dr. Lauren Decker is with Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office, and she talked about the autopsy that was done. A very unusual autopsy in this case, because the first thing she had was not a complete human to do an autopsy on. She had a human leg, and that was the leg that was found in Warnermount Park. She did determine certain things from that. She was able to determine, she said, that where the leg had been cut from the body that it came from, that it had been, apparently the flesh had been cut with something that was consistent with a knife, but that the femur did not appear to be clean cut. In fact, it appeared that it had been broken, smashed with blunt force trauma, which she later said would have had to have been pretty tremendous force, the kind of force you might see in a high-speed car accident, though she couldn't say what was used to crush and separate that bone. The femur is the largest bone in the body. It does take a significant amount of force to break it through, and she said she didn't have any determination as to what was done to do that. The other thing she talked about was the foot that was found in the playground near 31st and Galena. This was along the railroad tracks and the tree line just to the east of that playground and a couple blocks away from the car fire. She said it looked like that ankle in that case, there had been nothing used to cut through bone at all. And again, I'm just going to keep saying, if you're listening to this, today's testimony, some of this is really tough stuff. We don't like talking about it. It is unfortunately what is really at issue in this case. It is the subject. These are the facts. But I'm going to tell you, the next thing she said was that ankle or that foot appeared to have been separated at the ankle through the tendons, through the ligaments, the things in between, not cut through bone. So she said that could have been done simply with a knife. The significance there is there's no clear-cut evidence that some sort of a bone saw or a saw was used, a rotary saw, power tool, anything like that. It seems like it may have been more of a manual and really graphic and bloody and difficult job, not something that might have been what we all perhaps may have imagined, is that there was a guy with a bunch of power tools who used the saws at his disposal to do this. It seems the autopsy indicates somewhat otherwise. In the end, the defense was able to get that medical examiner to say that while she had determined that this was a homicide based on the suspicious circumstances of body parts being severed and being scattered throughout the community, that it was an undetermined cause otherwise. In terms of who did it, she could not conclude that. In terms of where it happened, she could not conclude that. And in terms of how it was done, she could not conclude that either. So big questions still, and may always remain, about exactly the manner in which Sade Robinson was killed and the manner in which her body was ultimately dismembered and scattered. Whether or not that is enough to create reasonable doubt for the jury remains to be seen, of course, in concert with all of the other evidence. It is 1:45 right now. I'm sorry, what'd you say there, Delaney? Okay, people are filing back into the courtroom. It's 1:45, so we're getting close to them resuming the afternoon session today. The state is still presenting its case in chief. We have not gotten to the defense. Again, 41 witnesses so far, 36 separate individuals, 5 who have testified twice at this point. And we are waiting to find out who we're going to hear from yet this afternoon. We don't have any idea how long the state has to go in its case. I'm seeing from Bill Miston, our reporter who's been in the courtroom all along, that the parties are in court, but not yet Maxwell Anderson. So if you look here, you can see we're seeing the top of that, the eagle at the top of the flag in the courtroom. And that is a sign that they are not back on the record, that they are not yet ready to resume, but it should be resuming here shortly, and we'll get another few hours of testimony today. Again, we've gotten no indication yet how long the state plans to go. We know that after 36 individuals and 41 different appearances on the stand, that there could be as many as 200 the state will call. It is highly unlikely they will do that, but we don't know really how much further this has to go. So we're following it all along right with you at home. I'm now seeing that Maxwell Anderson himself is in court, and so we should be hearing from the judge shortly to bring everything back into session. And of course, we're going to be here at the Wisconsin Live Desk every day. We'll be taking you from noon up through 4 o'clock to Fox 6 News at 4. You can watch all of our coverage, summations of what you've missed on Fox 6 News at 4, 5, and 6, and of course at 9 and 10. And if you want to keep watching after 4 o'clock, watching the testimony until the end of the day, you can see that live and uninterrupted on our Fox 6 News Milwaukee YouTube channel. Obviously, that has been going on throughout the trial, and we will continue that. We know that they said at the outset they expect this to run a couple of weeks. This is day 5. We probably still have at least 4 days to go, possibly more, but we don't know. This is speculation. This is guessing. We're reading the tea leaves here. I see the judge is now on the bench, so we're going to take you back out to the Milwaukee County Safety Building and the afternoon session of the Maxwell Anderson trial.
Yes, please. Going on the record, calling State of Wisconsin versus Maxwell Anderson, case 24, CF1692, same appearances.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a lovely lunch. The detective is still on the stand. We're still on direct examination. We have a new court reporter, so we're going to re-swear the witness at this point in time.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please be seated, restate and respell your name for the record.
Detective John, John, Guillot, Guillot.
Prior to lunch, you testified that you arrested Maxwell Anderson, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And you identified Maxwell Anderson as being present in the courtroom today, right?
Correct, yes.
I'm going to show you what's been previously received as Exhibit 204. Can you see that up on the screen?
I can, yes.
Okay. The person that's depicted in Exhibit 204, is that the same person that you arrested?
That is the same person that I arrested on April 4th, 2024, yes.
And that is Maxwell Anderson?
That is Maxwell Anderson.
You testified that when he was arrested, when you conducted surveillance on the defendant, you saw him with a backpack, correct?
Correct, yes.
Was that backpack ultimately recovered?
It was, yes.
And the backpack that can be seen in Exhibit 204, is that the same backpack as was recovered?
No, it does not appear so. If you take a look at the actual still shot, It appears to be like a tan camel backpack. The backpack recovered in Mr. Anderson's vehicle was a black backpack.
So let's go back to the traffic stop. You had interaction with him, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay, and when did that begin?
So when we got to the area of South 38th Street and West Lakefield Drive, like I stated before, we activated our emergency lights. We exited out of our vehicle and we approached Mr. Anderson's vehicle. My partner, Detective Blanchard, informed Mr. Anderson for the reason of the traffic stop, to which I then asked Mr. Anderson, where are you heading to? Mr. Anderson responded by saying he was going to the Greenfield Greenfield DMV.
Are you aware of where the Greenfield DMV is located?
Yes, I believe it's 5500 Grange Avenue in Greenfield.
And at this point, you testified you were about a block or a block and a half away from the defendant's house, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Was he traveling in the direction of the Greenfield DMV?
No, I believe that Mr. Anderson was heading to his house.
Can you describe how the defendant appeared during your contact with him while he was still in the car?
Yeah, Mr. Anderson was seated in the driver's seat, physically shaking as he was talking to Detective Blanchard and I, to which point, again, we then asked Mr. Anderson to shut off his vehicle. He does. We asked Mr. Anderson to exit the vehicle. He does.
You testified that you told him what the reason for the traffic stop was, correct?
That's correct, yes.
What did you inform him?
So we kind of did a ruse. We informed him that it was for expired registration, which was a valid traffic stop.
You didn't come out and say you're wanted for the homicide of Sade Robinson?
That's correct, no.
So at the point where he's talking about going to the DMV and physically shaking, he wasn't aware of why you were actually investigating him, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Describe how he was taken into custody.
He was asked to step out of the vehicle. He stepped out of the vehicle. He placed both his hands on top of the roof rack of his SUV. He placed, I believe, his wallet and a cell phone on top of the roof rack, at which point we brought down his hands. We placed his hands behind his back and then secured him in handcuffs.
The wallet and the cell phone, were those items recovered?
They were, yes.
Who recovered those?
Deputy Ethan Stout.
Do you recall what kind of cell phone?
Yes, it was a black, at least black in color, Samsung.
Did Deputy Stout then provide you with those items for you to place on inventory?
That's correct, yes.
Was the vehicle searched at that point?
At that specific point, I don't believe it was, no.
What happened to the vehicle?
A tow company called Ray's Towing responded to the scene, and they took possession of the vehicle, at which point another detective followed Ray's back to our substation, which is located in Wauwatosa. It's a secure substation, and the vehicle was placed in the substation, and investigators later obtained a search warrant for that vehicle.
Where was the defendant then taken?
Mr. Anderson was escorted to a Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office deputy squad car, at which point he was then conveyed to our detective bureau for further processing.
Are you aware of certain demographic information about the defendant?
Yes.
Do you know his date of birth and
I
his
do.
age at the time of the arrest?
Yeah, Mr. Anderson's date of birth, I believe, is November 26, 1990, and his date of birth, his age at the arrest was 33 years old.
Are you aware of his height?
Yes.
What was that?
I believe approximately 6'1".
And are you aware of what his weight at the time of arrest was?
Yes. At the time of the arrest, I believe it was around 180 pounds.
What did you do with the phone and wallet?
For the phone, I placed it into a secure evidence locker, which is located at our detective bureau, which is 821 West State Street. And then the wallet, I'm not completely sure. He might have, the wallet might have went with him with his property.
You placed the phone on a specific inventory number, correct?
Correct.
Does 24001539 item 1 sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
Nothing further.
Cross?
Good afternoon, Detective.
Afternoon.
So I just want to rewind back. When you said that you saw Max's car parked in the Victor's parking lot, correct?
Correct.
And you had said that you were on your way to Pizza Shuttle, but you kind of just drove past Victor's, right?
Yeah, we were en route to Pizza Shuttle to conduct further follow-up. When we were en route to Pizza Shuttle, we just drove by Victor's.
Okay. And you could see his vehicle parked in the lot, right?
I could see a black SUV parked in the parking lot, yes.
And so it wasn't like hidden behind like the alleyway behind Victor's, right?
That's correct. It was just in the parking lot.
And his car was there because you knew he had worked there, correct?
I'm not sure why his car was there.
But at the time when you drove by, one of the reasons you drove by is because you were aware that Maxwell Anderson worked at Victor's, correct?
No, it was just more of a coincidence that we drove by.
Okay. And then after you had seen that vehicle, that's when you called other squads or other detectives to kind of set up surveillance, right?
Yeah, after I confirmed the vehicle's license plate and can confirm that license plate listed back to Mr. Anderson, that's when I requested additional detectives to come.
And so you could see the license plate. The license plate hadn't been removed, correct?
That's correct.
Or covered up?
Correct.
And you knew the color of the vehicle when you'd first seen it, right?
That's correct.
And that the color of it was the same color that it was registered with DMV, right?
Correct.
And then I think you said about 15 minutes afterwards, you actually see Max, right?
Correct.
And he's walking just towards his car.
Yep, he's walking eastbound on Juneau Avenue towards his vehicle.
And this area of Milwaukee, this is right by the Metro Market, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Oh, and then if you can travel down Juneau, you hit like Fiserv Forum, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And you said he was just walking, correct? He wasn't running?
Correct, just walking.
He wasn't like looking over his shoulder or making any furtive movements, correct?
Correct.
And he wasn't wearing a mask, correct?
Correct.
Or wasn't trying to disguise himself in any way?
Correct.
And then he gets into his car. You said he sits in there on his phone for maybe 10 minutes and then he drives.
That's correct, yes.
I should clarify. He drives away from Victor's, correct?
Correct.
In the direction of his home.
Correct.
And when you see him walking, from Juneau, you said he's wearing a backpack?
Correct.
And you were aware that he was seen carrying a backpack while on that city bus, so the exhibit that's up on the screen right now?
Correct.
And you'd seen that before all of this happening with you, surveilling him outside Victor's, right?
Could you ask that one more time? I'm sorry.
Had you seen this photo before you'd seen his vehicle at Victor's?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. And you said the backpack that, well, now you know, the backpack that he's wearing while he's walking his vehicle at Victor's is different than that backpack, correct?
Correct.
And you had testified that you don't believe this backpack was recovered, the one on the screen.
I'm not sure if that backpack was ever recovered. I just testified the backpack in his vehicle, which was black in color, was recovered.
Oh, okay. And were you involved in any of the searches of Mr. Anderson's vehicle or his house?
I briefly assisted with the search at his residence. I was not part of any search with his vehicle.
Okay. But are you aware that there was 2 different searches conducted at Mr. Anderson's home?
I am aware of that, yes.
And the reason why the police can do sometimes secondary or second searches is because sometimes evidence can be missed.
Correct.
And that's why they did the secondary search, correct?
I'm not sure why they did the secondary search. It wasn't out of my scope.
Okay. But we do know you've seen, at least on 2 different occasions, Mr. Anderson wearing a backpack, right?
Correct.
And sometimes people carry backpacks, to carry belongings inside of them, right?
Fair.
I mean, if you ride the city buses, if you driving around the city of Milwaukee, you constantly see people with backpacks, right?
I don't know about constantly, but you see a fair share.
Okay. And then after he gets in his car, you said he waits about 10 minutes, and then he drives in the direction of his house, correct?
Correct.
And then you followed behind him?
Correct.
And you were in an unmarked squad car, right?
Correct.
So what does that look like? It doesn't say police on it, does it?
Correct. It's just a typical Ford Fusion. I believe it had a little tint on it. Has interior lights, but no police markings on it.
And so if you were a standard person and you see this vehicle, you wouldn't particularly know it was a police vehicle, correct?
That's fair to say.
I mean, that's kind of the point of an unmarked squad car, right? So people don't know.
Correct, to avoid detection and such.
And you said you activated your lights, correct?
Correct.
So this vehicle does have lights on it, but they're just not easily discernible, right?
Yeah, there's interior lights, and then there's like some hidden lights in the grill portion of the vehicle.
Okay. And as you said, you activate the lights, Mr. Anderson pulls over, right?
Correct.
He doesn't try to flee, correct?
That is correct.
And you sometimes, I'm sure you've been involved in investigations with fleeings, correct?
Correct.
I mean, oftentimes the police pull someone over. If they have something, like drugs in their car, they flee at a high speed away from the police, right?
That happens, yes.
But that didn't happen in this case, correct?
Correct.
And once you made contact with him, he was answering your questions, correct?
Correct.
And he didn't try to run away on foot, correct?
Correct.
He didn't resist arrest, right?
Correct.
He wasn't argumentative.
Correct.
I think you described him. He was cooperative, right?
Cooperative. He complied. Yes.
And he wasn't armed.
He was not armed.
And you said that he was visibly shaking, right?
Correct.
And you've seen that in times you've conducted traffic stops, right?
I have, yes.
I mean, because not everyone's super comfortable with the police, right?
Fair.
And especially if you don't know you're getting pulled over by a police officer, sometimes you can be a little anxious or a little nervous, right?
That's fair.
And you'd said that the reason you told him that you were pulling him over was something about a license plate, or what was it?
His registration being expired, which it actually was.
Okay. And then he had said that he was going to the Greenfield DMV, correct?
That is the response that he gave us, yes.
Okay. And so he gave that response after you told him that's why you'd pulled him over.
Correct.
Nothing further.
State? Were there other officers with you at the time of the traffic stop, meaning other squad cars?
Yes.
And were those marked or unmarked?
There was mostly unmarked. I believe that there might have been one marked car, but most of the cars with us were all unmarked.
And when your unmarked squad's lights are activated, is it clear that it's a squad car?
Yeah, it's clear, and it's 360 lighting all around.
And there's a siren too?
There is a siren.
Nothing further.
Defense?
Yes, just briefly, Judge. So, Detective, you said that there was multiple squads that kind of had almost surrounded the car after it had been pulled over?
I wouldn't use the word surround. I would say there was multiple unmarked squad cars in the area. Like I testified before, there was a couple unmarked squad cars at Mr. Anderson's residence. There's a couple unmarked squad cars down the block from the traffic stop. And I believe there might have been another unmarked squad car behind our actual unmarked squad car during the traffic stop itself.
Okay, so it's your unmarked squad and also another unmarked squad behind yours, correct?
That's fair to say, yes.
And so multiple officers, correct?
I think in total there was 3, including me.
Okay, and then are you armed when you're on duty?
Yes.
And you were armed at the time that you were making contact with Mr. Anderson, correct?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
State?
Nothing further.
Thank you, Detective.
Thanks.
State your next witness.
Deputy Ethan Stout.
swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
I am Deputy Ethan Stout, E-T-H-A-N, last name S-T-O-U-D-T.
You a deputy with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office?
I am.
How long have you been employed by the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office?
Approximately 3.5 years.
Were you working in your capacity as a deputy back on April 4th, 2024?
I was.
Did you participate in the arrest of Maxwell Anderson that day?
I did.
Were you present when he was arrested?
I was.
Is he in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you identify him just for the record?
I'll stipulate.
All right.
The record will so reflect.
Thank you. Where did this arrest occur?
The arrest occurred in the area of South 38th and Lakeview, if I'm not mistaken.
Were you wearing a body cam at the time of the arrest?
I was.
You were not the individual who made direct contact with Mr. Anderson at the beginning of the traffic stop, correct?
No, I was a backup officer.
So tell us what you did then.
I arrived on scene. I approached the vehicle from the passenger side. I had my body-worn camera that I wear on my chest. I had it activated. And while my partners were speaking with Mr. Anderson on the driver's side of the vehicle, I was, I guess, looking through the window or just providing backup or cover for them from the opposite side of the vehicle.
During the initial contact, you were on the front passenger side of his Hyundai?
That's correct.
At some point, did you go around and assist in taking him into custody?
I did.
While that was occurring, did Mr. Anderson place any items of his on the roof of the car?
Yes.
What items?
As Mr. Anderson exited his vehicle, he had his phone in his left hand and his wallet in his right hand, and my partners took hold of his arms, and as they did, he set his belongings on top of the vehicle.
Did you yourself collect those items?
I did.
Okay. I'm going to show you exhibits 453 and 263.
Have the numbers one more time.
453 and 263.
Thank you.
Starting with 453, do you recognize what that item is?
I do.
What is it?
This is Mr. Anderson's wallet.
Move 453 into evidence.
Any objection?
Fine.
It's received.
And 263, do you recognize what that item is?
I do.
What is that?
This is Mr. Anderson's cell phone.
Those are the actual objects you collected off the roof of his car that he put there?
That is correct.
Move 263 in.
Any objection?
No.
Received.
I've got on the screen next to you and over here, whatever TV you're more comfortable looking at, exhibit 449. Do you recognize what this is just on the still frame that I have up here?
I do.
What is this?
This would be my body-worn camera from the date and time of the arrest.
What is that date and time?
That is going to be the year 2024, April 4th, at 1:15, excuse me.
Okay, and what you're doing right now, you're reading up here in the right-hand corner, correct?
Yes.
It's a little hard to see because of the background, but this was 1:17 on April 4th?
Correct.
Okay, I'd move 449 in and ask to publish.
Any objection?
No.
It's received. Go ahead.
Playing it from 23 seconds is where I picked up the video.
Somebody calling FOX6 dispatch C16 when ready. FOX16, go ahead, put your info. 13:15 hours. Case number is 24 Frank Adam 1849. Last name of defendant is Allison Adam Lincoln Ida Sam Ocean Nora. First name is Eric. Middle name is Lars and Robert. No firearms. C16. Yeah. 32 headed southbound Hampton on. 45 southbound Hampton on for Apollo return for highway. Versus Apollo.
Any weapons items, sir?
No. What's going on?
Yeah, somebody just radio it.
124 dispatch.
So, want to know what's going on? The key to any ignition?
Yes. 124, yeah, one in custody.
Paused it at 3 minutes, 10 seconds.
Is that video on a flash drive or on a CD?
This is a disc, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I'm gonna pick it up at 3 minutes, 22 seconds.
See the paperwork at home, then I can go to, the DMV. 132 dispatch.
I'm just gonna unbutton this just to search. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Said nothing on you at all, right? Nothing's gonna poke me or anything like that?
Service 13:17 hours. Last name of Banks. First name of Ronald. Middle initial of Lincoln C16. Copy that. 132 dispatch on it. 132, go ahead. You started told me first. Alright, you give me the address and now you give me a plate. I gotta go to a different street. Go ahead with the plate again. Wisconsin, Adam Mary, Robert, 8083. And I'm sorry, 16.
Yeah, we're good.
80.
Paused it at 4 minutes, 52 seconds. What we watched there, Deputy, you assisted in patting him down?
That's correct.
No weapons or anything on him?
There were not.
I have nothing else.
Cross?
One minute, please.
Okay, so good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Are you still employed at the Sheriff's Department?
I am.
Okay. You're a deputy or a detective?
I'm a deputy.
And what we've watched here is basically a traffic stop where there's multiple undercover officers that are parked behind Mr. Anderson's car when he was stopped, right?
Yes.
So a fairly sizable operation?
Yes.
And that's because Max had been identified as somebody that you wanted to take into custody, right?
That is correct.
And in fact, there was even a briefing beforehand to discuss that, right?
Correct.
This wasn't a coincidental thing, was it?
It was not.
The whole plan was to conduct surveillance, follow him, and then do a stop before he would ever get to his house, right?
Yes.
And what we saw in your body cam is Mr. Anderson cooperating with law enforcement.
Correct.
And actually, at one point, I heard him ask, what is this all about, or what's happening? Did you hear that?
Yes, I do recall that.
And law enforcement told him it was an expired registration.
Yes.
He was never told during this time that you're a suspect in something much more serious.
At that time, I do not recall hearing that.
Certainly, one might a person might draw the conclusion that there's something else that they're suspected of when they see all these unmarked squad cars behind them for a traffic stop, right?
Yes.
Nevertheless, Mr. Anderson did not flee.
He did not.
Didn't struggle one bit.
No, he did not.
And in fact, the way he looked when you saw him, he had a hat, a beanie on, or a winter cap on, right?
Yes.
But in terms of how he looked when his picture was shown at the briefing and how he looks at the stop, there was no difference, right?
In his physical appearance, you mean the demeanor that he had?
Yeah, physical appearance. He didn't change his physical appearance, right?
No.
No haircut or facial shade, anything different about his appearance, right?
Not that I recall, no.
Were you involved in the search of the vehicle?
I was not. I don't know.
Well, you did obviously recover a phone and a wallet, right?
Correct.
And that wallet, you identified it. It was an exhibit, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were the one who recovered this, right?
I was.
Did you examine it?
On scene?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, there was nothing about the blood. The wallet didn't have blood on it that you saw or anything like that, did it?
Not that I recall.
And the cell phone, Mr. Anderson put that on top of his vehicle as well, right?
That's correct.
And certainly as a deputy, you're involved in traffic stops on a regular basis, I would assume, right?
Yes.
You've had certainly you've had situations where the lights go on and they flee.
Yes.
They just floor it and try to get out of there.
Correct, yes.
Or even once they're stopped, they open the door and try to run from the scene of the stop, right?
Yes.
So we could call this essentially a normal traffic stop with a cooperative person, right?
Yes.
And were you involved in the, you also did other things in this case, including going to Victor's and speaking with people that work there, right?
That's correct.
And you learned that Mr. Anderson worked at Victor's, right?
Correct.
He was a bartender there for a number of years, right?
Yes.
Or and you talked to his manager even, didn't you, Jose Hernandez?
That's correct.
And in fact, one of the things that you did there was you even wanted to access their camera system at Victor's to study that, right?
That's correct.
And you even served a subpoena on the, would you call it a restaurant, a bar? What would you call it?
Bar, nightclub.
You served a subpoena on the bar and nightclub, right?
Yes.
And essentially what you got from that was a couple of videos that show that Max Anderson and Sade have had contact there, right?
Yes.
Nothing about that showed any threatening behavior by Mr. Anderson?
No.
Or something suspicious between the two of them that you would identify?
No.
You interviewed a big part of your job actually was the whole Victor side of it, wasn't it? Going there and talking to people and pulling the videos?
Yes, I talked to multiple people from Victor's.
And the reason for that is because you want to try to figure out if there's something that points to Mr. Anderson as having committed this crime, right?
In the grand scheme of things, yes.
And all that revealed was that Mr. Anderson and Sade Robinson had interacted with each other and obviously knew each other, right?
Yes.
Were you involved in any side of the case to get footage from Twisted Fisherman or Duke's on Water Street? Did you involve yourself in any of that?
I did not.
Obviously, you went and conducted neighborhood surveillance canvases where you pulled video footage on April 4th from various houses, right?
Reviewed potential footage, yes.
And what was the point of that?
From what location specifically?
Well, I saw that you did that in the Gordon Place area.
Sure. That specific area, I believe the purpose was to look for footage of a vehicle or anything unusual that happened during a certain time frame that had been pointed out to me and fellow deputies.
The East Concordia, North Gordon Place area?
Yes.
Is that near Mr. Anderson's house?
No, it is not.
Just a different area?
Yes.
And part of what you do in general, though, is you can look for things like Ring doorbell videos and other such things to try to piece cases together, right?
Yes.
You also conducted a search of a park, right? A Pleasant Valley Park?
Yes.
Nothing noteworthy there, right?
Correct, nothing.
No body parts or human remains?
No.
Okay, that's all.
State?
Nothing else.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you.
State your next witness.
Brian Conti.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
Detective Brian Conti, BrianConte.
Are you a detective with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes,
How long have you worked for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office as law enforcement?
29 years.
Were you working as a detective back on April 5th, 2024?
Yes,
Did you participate in general into the investigation into the disappearance of Sade Robinson?
yes,
On April 5th, 2024, did you have personal contact with Maxwell Anderson?
yes,
The person I'm referring to as Maxwell Anderson, do you see that person in court today?
yes,
Could you?
I'll just stipulate to this in general, for it's clear for the record, this is Max Anderson here.
Okay, so you had contact with the defendant on April 5th, correct?
yes,
Was the purpose of having contact with the defendant on April 5th to get a DNA sample from him?
yes.
Can you tell the jury what that is and how you go about obtaining it from a person?
Yes, we needed to get a DNA sample, and it's called a buccal swab, and it's a swab of their cheek cells on the inside of their mouth. So we put fresh gloves on. We use fresh, unopened cotton swabs, one swab for one inside of his cheek, a second swab for the second cheek, and we place it in a cardboard box, and then we seal it in an envelope, a paper envelope.
To the best of your ability, you're trying to ensure the swab is not contaminated, correct?
Yes.
And why is it that you swab the cheek?
Because we've been instructed or trained that gives the best human cells to contain DNA, and that's how we've been trained.
What do you do this with?
With
what do you use to do it?
Cotton applicator swabs that are provided to us for that purpose.
And you did that with Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Showing you 407. 407 is a sealed envelope. Do you know what that is based on the markings that are on it?
Yes.
What is it?
This is the envelope containing those buccal swabs that I obtained on that day.
From the defendant?
From the defendant.
I've moved 407 in.
Any objection?
No.
Received.
There's additionally a yellow sticker on this envelope, not the exhibit sticker, but a different one. Do you know where that is from?
Yes, that is a evidence sticker that the Wisconsin Crime Lab places on items submitted to the lab for testing.
And the purpose of getting the buccal swab or the DNA swab from Mr. Anderson was to
ultimately at some point send it off to the state crime lab for DNA analysis, right?
Yes.
Nothing else?
Defense?
No.
Thank you, Detective.
You're welcome.
State your next witness.
Let me check the hallway. I think, well, I'll check the hallway. Okay, the state's going to call Officer Brooke Tavagian. I think she's coming from another room. I'm going to recall Detective Vandertye briefly.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you can please be seated, restate, and respell your name for the record.
I am Detective Matthew, M-A-T-T-H-E-W, Vandertye, V-A-N-D-E-R-T-I-E.
Detective Vandertide, you had previously testified in this trial about the exigency records for Shadi Robinson's phone, as well as doing warrants for those records, as well as the records for Maxwell Anderson's phone and the Life 360 accounts, right?
Yes.
And did you also do something upon the arrest of Maxwell Anderson regarding his phone?
Yes.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 263, which has already been admitted. Do you recognize what 263 is?
Yes, this is Samsung cellular telephone that was recovered based on my knowledge from Maxwell Anderson.
You were not there for Maxwell Anderson's arrest or the recovery of that phone, right?
Correct.
After he was arrested, did you take possession of that phone at some point in time and take it anywhere?
Yes, on April 8th, 2024.
And where did you take that cell phone?
This cell phone, I transported it to the Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation out in Brookfield, Wisconsin.
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Out in Brookfield, Wisconsin.
And for what purpose was that?
For forensic examination or forensic download.
What is a forensic examination?
Essentially, an analyst will download the information or the data from the phone using forensic techniques that they are trained to do.
Did you communicate with the person who did that in this case?
Yes.
With that phone?
Yes.
Who was that?
It was DCI, or Division of Criminal Investigation employee Juan Luis Villegas.
Did he then provide you with something after the examination was done?
Yes. On the following day, I again traveled to the DCI offices where Juan Luis Villegas returned the cell phone, in addition to a USB flash drive containing that forensic examination, those files.
I'm showing you Exhibit 264. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes, that is the USB flash drive I just described.
That contains the forensic download of that Samsung phone?
Yes.
Move 264 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
It's received.
I just have a couple more questions. I want to actually go back to those records we talked about. Between the exigency records and the records that you obtained from Verizon, I'm only talking about for Shadi Robinson's phone, what was the total date range of text messages that you received the SMS content for?
Between the exigency records and the search warrant records was March 27th, 2024 to April 3rd, 2024.
Have you reviewed the entirety of those text message contents?
Yes, between that time frame, yes.
Did you discover, and I know we read through a part of the conversation that she had with Maxwell Anderson's phone number, did you review conversations she was having with other people as well?
Yes.
Were there any other conversations you observed where it appeared she was planning on meeting up with anybody else on April 1st or April 2nd, the evening of April 1st and then maybe April 2nd?
No.
Were there any conversations that you reviewed that seemed volatile in any way, angry in any way?
No.
Were there any conversations that you reviewed that referenced drugs?
No.
Nothing else?
Ross?
No.
Thank you.
All right, now I'll call Brooke Tavagian.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
If you could please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Brooke Tavagian. First name spelled B as in boy, R-O-O-K-E. Last Tavagian, T as in Tom, A. V as in Victor, A. J-I-A-N.
All right, good afternoon. How are you employed?
I am a police officer with the Waukegan Police Department.
Waukegan, Illinois?
Yes,
That's about 50 miles south of here, give or take?
approximately.
Okay. You drove up here this afternoon to testify?
Yes.
How long have you been a police officer with the Waukegan Police Department?
Almost 9 years.
Is Waukegan is it a city or is it a village?
It's a city.
City, okay. Is it on the shores of Lake Michigan?
Yes.
Were you working in your capacity as a police officer with the Waukegan Police Department back on May 11th, 2024?
Yes.
Were you just assigned to routine patrol, or what's your shift like?
I was working as an evidence technician that day.
And what shift times were you working?
3:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m.
Around 8 p.m., shortly prior to 8 p.m., were you dispatched anywhere in particular?
To the lakefront, which was 200 Seahorse.
What information were you given upon being dispatched to that location?
That there was a potential body part located on the north shore of the beach.
I think you were giving an address. What was the address?
200 Seahorse Drive.
Were you alone or were you with a partner when that happened?
I was driving alone, but I met with other officers on scene.
The location of 200 Seahorse Drive, what is that?
It's like the beach address, or around the beach.
Right on the shores.
Yes.
Is it a sandy beach?
Yes.
Are there dunes as well?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of what the person who called for a police response had reported?
From my understanding, the person who made the complaint said that there was a potential human arm located on the beach.
Then you went there how?
I drove my squad car to the beach, to the parking lot, and then I was transported to the location of the body part by ATV.
ATV?
Yes.
And that was, how far did you have to go up the beach on the ATV?
I don't know exactly, but it was pretty far north. It's not easily accessible. You can't get to it from the parking lot. You have to either walk, usually just have to walk it.
Not easily accessible though?
Correct.
When you got to the location where you had been called to, what did you observe?
I observed an apparent human arm laying on the beach.
How did it look to you?
It looked decayed.
Decayed?
Yeah, decomposing.
Did it appear to you that it had washed ashore?
Yes.
What about it gave you that impression?
The coloring of it was discolored, sometimes common to seeing stuff in the water, like body parts. There was pieces of the arm missing from like the forearm, kind of looked like maybe it was being chewed on by, marine life.
And was it close to the waterline?
Yes.
Did you take some photos of it to document where you found it?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibits 258, 259, 260, and 261.
And I stipulate to these as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Then they're received.
All right. These are received into evidence. Can you just tell us you can look at all four of them and tell me if you took those photos.
Yes. Yes.
Are those all photos of the arm that you found at the beach?
Yes.
And I'm actually going to show you what's already been admitted into evidence is exhibit 262. Does that appear to be the same arm?
Yes.
Okay. And you're able to tell that how?
By the decomposition on it, and I remember this area and these areas.
Okay. And you're pointing to sort of where it would link to the shoulder as well as the wrist?
Yes. And it's the right arm.
I'm going to show you 260. Just take a minute to come up here. All right. Exhibit 260. Now it was nighttime when you took these photos, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the leg, is it in the middle there underneath that log? Or excuse me, the arm?
The arm, yes.
Okay. Here's 259, just a close-up, a little blurry, but it was in the sand like that?
Yes.
All right. 258. Was it located right underneath that log?
Yes, just like how it is there.
Okay. Lastly, 261. Is that how it appeared when you found it?
Yes.
Was the Lake County coroner called out to the scene?
Yes.
What did you do when that happened?
I took some more photos along with the coroner, and I just allowed him to do his investigation.
Did the coroner recover the arm and take it back to the Lake County coroner's office?
Yes.
Did you stay with that person, or did you go on doing other things?
I went on doing other things.
But you stayed with the arm until the coroner recovered it from the scene?
Yes.
I have nothing else.
Cross?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone need a break? Are we okay right now? Need a break? Okay. I see some yeses. So we'll take a break, our afternoon break, and then we'll come back shortly. You can just leave your notebooks on your chairs.
I would call 4 civilians at some point in the rest of the afternoon.
Okay.
Russell Davis, Brian Calvert, Tim Sluga, none of them have criminal convictions. And then Lemetra Griffin has 1 misdemeanor conviction from 2021.
Well, I'm sorry, the last name?
Griffin.
On defense, are you in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Griffin, if she testifies, have you ever been convicted of a crime? The answer will be yes. How many times? 1.
I will make sure that Lemetra Griffin knows that answer.
Anything else?
No.
Defense?
No.
Okay, we'll be back shortly then.
Okay, so Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson here at the Wisconsin Live Desk as court has once again gone into a brief afternoon recess. It is 2:45. We have heard from 4 witnesses since the afternoon session began. It was a continuation first of a Milwaukee police detective, followed by a sheriff's deputy, a sheriff's detective, and then a police officer from Waukegan, Illinois. We'll recap some of what we have heard this afternoon after we take this break here from the Wisconsin Live Desk.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson here once again at the Wisconsin Live Desk as we are in a recess. The court just took a couple of minutes ago. You can see that the clock on the wall shows 2:50 p.m. as they take what will probably be, I'm guessing, the final break of the afternoon, and then maybe another hour and a half or so of continuous testimony, though you never know. Sometimes the court takes more than that. In any case, oh, there we go. We've had as I mentioned, four witnesses this afternoon. Nothing quite of the same consequence as what we heard this morning. Probably the most impactful witness of the day was the first, and that was Maxwell Anderson's tenant, former tenant Pete Warbington, who testified about what he heard and or didn't hear the night that Sade Robinson disappeared, and before her remains were found. We heard this afternoon from Milwaukee Police Detective John Galat. He was recalled, as well as Milwaukee County Sheriff's Deputy Ethan Stout. Deputy Stout participated in the arrest of Maxwell Anderson. We saw some body camera video of that arrest. There really wasn't much of significance to that. They described how they essentially used a ruse to arrest him, what the detective essentially meant by that was they didn't tell him they were arresting him in connection to the death of Sade Robinson, but rather that they were performing a traffic stop because he had expired license plates, which police said was in fact true at that time. Nonetheless, Anderson appeared to comply. He was cooperative with officers. He did ask at one point, "What's this about?" The officers did not respond. There was an indication in the report that he seemed maybe a bit shaken or nervous or agitated. The defense asked some questions saying, is that not common? Someone who is maybe not particularly comfortable with police or a lot of police officers and surrounding them, and the officer who was being interviewed at that time said that is actually common, or it would be consistent with that. So I'm not really sure how much significant came out of that particular arrest. Maybe we'll hear in closing arguments why they believe, either one side or the other believes that was significant. We heard quick recall of Matthew Vandertye. I thought this was interesting. The state recalled this detective who had been called much earlier in the trial. He was called on day one of testimony. Matthew Vandertye was originally the first person to talk about some of the digital evidence, particularly in this case from Sade Robinson's cell phone, and that was text messages that were recovered between Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson. And honestly, that's what kicked everything off in terms of investigators' interest in Maxwell Anderson as a suspect here, because those text messages showed that Sade Robinson and Maxwell Anderson had just met out to go out on a date together on April 1st at around a little after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were together as late as 9-something in the evening when they were still at another Milwaukee bar called Duke's on Water. He talked about having followed those, the officers, I don't know if it was Vandertye specifically, had talked about following some of the cell phone pings back down to Maxwell Anderson's home after their date. But the significance of calling him back, he was the sixth witness in the case. Shortly after he testified on Wednesday last week, we heard from building maintenance and from the co-worker of Sade Robinson about police coming to search the apartment when Sade Robinson had been reported missing. And the next morning, on Thursday, day 3 of the trial, we heard from Milwaukee police detectives who talked about what they found when they went inside. They found an apartment that showed no signs of a struggle. There was no sign of any kind of a break-in. Slightly messy apartment, but nothing out of the ordinary for a college student, which she was at MATC. But then the defense raised some questions. They wanted to get some evidence introduced about drugs that were found inside a safe. There were 47 pills which police referred to as meth. They weren't clear on exactly what kind of a pill beyond that. It wasn't field tested, or it was field tested. It was not tested in a laboratory to know what it was. But there was reference to these pills being found along with some THC. Autopsy did not show any drugs in Sade Robinson's system, although it was a pretty unusual autopsy because of the manner in which the body parts were recovered independently and not as one whole. But the defense raised the question of, or wanted to introduce the evidence of the pills being found, the THC being found. And their argument to the court was, one possible theory is she was mixed up with some other troubling people who might have been violent, who might have posed a danger. Well, we didn't really hear much of anything more about that until just a few minutes ago when the state called Matthew Vandertye, because he's a Milwaukee County detective. He did the forensic examination of that phone. And so the prosecution went back and said, well, you looked at her phone. The defense has raised this prospect that maybe she was interacting with some dangerous people. Maybe she was buying and selling drugs. They asked, did you see any evidence of any communications about drugs on that phone? And the detective said no. And I think it was a pretty brief recall to bring him back up on the stand. It didn't seem like it had been planned earlier. They had another police officer from Waukegan, Illinois waiting to go. They held up on her and brought Vandertye back in. It seems as though they wanted to make sure they got on the record that if the defense is going to try to raise this alternate theory that maybe she was mixed up with some other dangerous people, well, there certainly wasn't any evidence of that on her cell phone. There was evidence she'd been communicating with Maxwell Anderson. Again, a lot of times when I tell you what we think the significance is, we're making our best educated guess because we haven't heard the closing arguments. We haven't heard how the state plans to sew all of this evidence together. We haven't heard the theory from the defense as to why they believe there is at least reasonable doubt, but we will hear all of that when, of course, testimony wraps up. After Matthew Vandertye, we heard from a police officer from Waukegan, Illinois. Her name is Brooke Tavajian, I believe. It's Tavajian. She is the officer who responded when there was discovery of another bit of human remains that washed up on Waukegan Beach. That is more than 50 miles south of Milwaukee. And it was Waukegan, Illinois, where an arm belonging to Sade Robinson surfaced nearly a month after her disappearance. In this case, now remember when the leg washed up in Warnemount Park, we heard detectives and we heard those who responded to the scene say that the leg appeared to be freshly intact. It did not appear to have decomposed. It didn't appear to have any particular signs of it having been there for a significant length of time. That was on April 2nd, which we now know was the day after she met with Maxwell Anderson. This was discovered in May, a month after. And by the time the arm is discovered, this detective, and I just warn you again, what I'm about to say is pretty graphic stuff, but the detective said that the arm appeared to be decomposed. It looked like body parts that you see that have been in a lake for a period of time, and in fact it looked like that it had potentially sustained bites from marine life, from sea life, from something in the water that was, obviously trying to feast on those remains. So by the time this other body part washes up in Waukegan, Illinois, it's clearly been in the water a while. It's presuming it was deposited in the same place as the leg that was discovered after the car smashes through the gate to go down by the pump house in Warnemount Park in Cudahy. It's floated 50 miles to the south and been in that water for nearly a month. So that's what she was talking about when it came time. The court, I think once both sides were done with the Waukegan police officer, the court asked, is anybody ready for a break here? She looks at the jury. She sees a couple of yes nods or some hands and says, okay, let's step away for a little while. We don't know how long this break will be. I suspect it'll be about a 10 to 15 minute break. So we've got a few more minutes to go. And then we'll get to the rest of the afternoon. We still have not heard some of the evidence we are expecting to, which is keep waiting for the discovery of what was on Maxwell Anderson's phone. We heard about that in opening statements. That seems that is going to be a key element in the state's case. We haven't heard that yet. Not sure what else remains to be seen, though. The state has covered a lot of ground. We've now gone from Cudahy, Warnemount Park. We've worked all the way up to the north side of Milwaukee where the car fire was, the scene near a couple of blocks away near 31st and Galena, the playground, the woods, the railroad tracks there where some of her remains and a blanket were discovered. We also know that there was all that video of Maxwell Anderson, or what the state says was Maxwell Anderson, but it seems pretty clear-cut that it was him based on the visuals later on, that you see him going from the scene of the car fire and walking all the way to a bus stop, getting on a Milwaukee County Transit bus and riding back to the south side, just within a few blocks of the home of Maxwell Anderson. So we've covered all of that ground, and today we saw inside Maxwell Anderson's home. I'm hearing now that the court is back. The judge is back on the bench, so we're going to send you back out to the Milwaukee County Safety Building for the afternoon of testimony.
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You can please be seated, restate and respell your name for the record.
Detective Joanne Donner, Joann-Donner.
Detective Donner, you heard Officer Tavagian from Waukegan, Illinois, testify about the recovery of the arm, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you at some point after that arm was recovered go down to the Lake County, Illinois coroner's office yourself?
I did.
Why did you do that?
To retrieve a DNA standard from the arm so that we could compare it with Sade Robinson.
And a DNA standard from the arm recovered on the shores of Waukegan, Illinois, it was your understanding that that had been taken by the Lake County coroner?
Correct.
Did you, in fact, recover that DNA sample from the arm?
I did.
I'm going to show you 454. You know what this is?
Yes, this is what I recovered.
Okay. This is the DNA swab from the arm recovered in Waukegan, Illinois?
That is correct.
And were you able to discern between the arm in Waukegan, Illinois and the torso recovered in South Milwaukee? Were you able to come to any conclusion how those items got there, how those body parts got there?
Yes, that they would have traveled via the lake due to the currents in a southerly direction.
Is that something you actually looked into yourself?
I did.
Okay. Lastly, you also were part of transporting the arm from the Lake County Coroner's Office to the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner, correct?
That's correct. Once it was confirmed that it did belong to Sade, I went down and followed a transport company back to the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner.
That would have been in June of 2024?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's why Dr. Decker, when she was testifying earlier, she didn't examine the arm until June. That would be the reason?
That is correct. We were waiting for the DNA results.
To confirm that it was in fact Sade's?
That's correct.
Once that was confirmed, that's when you went down there?
Correct.
Nothing else?
Press.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
State.
Recalling Detective Galat.
Detective Galat, you're still under oath.
Thank you.
State.
Detective, another role you played in this investigation was to look for surveillance video of locations that might be of note to the investigation, correct?
Correct.
Early on in the investigation, you were aware that exigency phone records were obtained, right?
That is correct, yes.
Did those records lead you to suspect that either Sade Robinson or Maxwell Anderson or both at some point went to the Twisted Fisherman restaurant?
Correct, yes.
Did you go to Twisted Fisherman and recover surveillance video?
I did, yes.
Who did you meet with to do that?
The owner, I believe his name was Russell Davis.
You went to the restaurant and talked to Mr. Davis?
I did, yes.
And then subsequently reviewed video footage from that restaurant?
That is correct, yes.
On the screen, I have a disc that's marked 235. Do you recognize what this is?
I do, yes. This is surveillance footage from the Twisted Fisherman located at 1200 West Canal Drive, I believe.
And that's
City and County of Milwaukee.
okay. And specifically down sort of in the Miller Valley, right?
Correct. Another landmark sort of by it is Potawatomi Bingo Casino.
And We Energies?
Correct, yes.
How many camera angles did you review and or recover?
I'm not exactly sure on the specific number. I know that there was an outside facing the deck area. There's another one on the other side facing east, and then there's multiple cameras inside the establishment.
This is one of those cameras?
Correct, yes.
And this would be looking at the west deck?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All of these videos, what kind of system was it?
This was a Ring surveillance DVR system.
And the Ring logo is up here in the left corner?
That's correct, yes.
And date and time stamps on these videos were generally accurate?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I'm going to move 235 in and ask to publish. I have numerous clips to play.
Any objection?
No.
Received. Go ahead.
So to orient us, we're looking sort of in a northwestern direction, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Where my mouse is here, that would be the river?
Correct.
All right. Let me get the volume on first. Some of these have, or all of them, I think, have volume, right?
Correct.
All right, playing the first clip, and for the record, the video titles, well, I guess I'll ask you, Detective. These video titles, as they're labeled on here, that's not what they were labeled when you download them. Those were renamed for court presentation purposes, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. I'm going to play the video labeled it ends in arriving west deck.mp4. That 14-second clip, I'm going to just go right to the beginning of it. It's a 14-second clip that starts at what time?
17:09 hours, which is 5:09 p.m. on April 1st, 2024.
Did you see anybody in that clip that you recognize?
Yes, I saw Mr. Maxwell Anderson.
And he does what?
He walks into the establishment from the west.
And he's alone?
Correct.
All right. Next clip, the end of it is titled Arrival Inside Bar. It's 2 minutes long. And as it plays, this is picking up at around the same time, 5:09 p.m.?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to fast forward briefly. All right, the clip ended. Essentially, he comes in, he sits down next to who?
A bartender named Brian Culvert.
I'm going to show you 241. Just a screenshot of that first camera we watched.
Correct.
Okay, move 241 in, ask to publish.
No objection.
Received.
Just so the jury can see. All right. That's Mr. Anderson?
That is Mr. Anderson. That is correct.
And what were you able to observe that he's wearing?
Mr. Anderson's wearing a black in color Carhartt t-shirt, appears to be wearing a red in color flannel over that t-shirt, and blue jeans. And his hairstyle is in a bun fashion.
I'm going to go back to Exhibit 235 here. And if you're looking at my screen now, there's basically, it's just a bunch of clips, ring clips that you were able to recover, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. We're not going to watch all of them, but why don't we pick up this clip picks up at what time, Detective?
1719 hours, which again is 5:19 p.m.
Okay, so this is about 9 to 10 minutes after he arrived?
That's correct, yes.
He's seated alone at the bar, and that employee is now moved behind the bar, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Playing that clip in fast forward. And what is Mr. Anderson, what has he ordered that you can see?
It appears that he just ordered a beer.
Okay. The next clip on that you were able to recover picks up at what time?
That is 1721 hours on the footage, so 5:21 p.m.
And at this time, someone is seated next to Mr. Anderson now, correct?
That's correct, yes.
I'm going to go back out, playing the video. It ends in arriving Twisted Fisherman. Play that from the beginning. Pause that clip at 16 seconds. What did we just observe?
We observed Sade Robinson walking into the Twisted Fisherman from the east.
And that was at about 5:20?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So by 5:21, they're seated together at the bar?
Correct.
All right, that last clip for the record picks up at 17:21:40 is the timestamp on it. That's how I'm going to keep the record of the clips we're watching. And they're just sitting there next to each other. It's not even talking at that point, right?
That is correct, yes.
Eventually, did they get food?
Yes.
Drinks?
Correct, yes.
I'm going to pull up a clip. What time does this clip start, Detective?
1742 hours, which again, 5:42 p.m.
And by this time, by 5:42, they're eating food, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the quickest ones that I'm not doing good. I had a little too much tequila yesterday. Because at the end of Mr. Brunch, it was amazing. I saw that.
What was happening in that clip?
It appears that they're just having a casual conversation with the bartender, and the bartender later pours out a shot.
The next clip picks up at what time?
17:44 hours, 5:44 p.m.
And 20 seconds?
Correct.
Playing this clip.
I've been there with some really, really good people. So,
All right. And in that clip, did all three of them do the shot together?
That's correct. I believe I heard the bartender say cheers, which then proceeded them to all do the shot together, yes.
And Sade has what appears to be in front of her some kind of food, and then there looks like there's a cocktail and perhaps a water?
That's fair, yes.
Okay. The next clip I'm playing picks up at 5:48:26, and again, that shot that they did was at 5:44?
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna go. They smell so good though. I'm gonna go. I can't cut it right now because I'm working. So. Oh, at the end. Oh, at the end. So. Yeah, so. My two chefs at the on the station.
In that clip, what happens?
It appears that Mr. Anderson briefly steps away to possibly use the restroom, and then in the meantime, Miss Robinson is just having casual conversation with the bartender.
Next clip I have up starts at what time?
17:58 hours, which is 5:58 p.m.
That clip shows us the bartender clearing their plates, right?
Correct, yes.
So that's around 6 p.m.
Correct.
Done eating, both of their plates getting cleared.
That is correct, yes.
Next clip picks up. What's the time that this picks up to the second detective?
1,800 hours, 47 seconds, which 6 p.m.
But my friends that are not in the industry don't understand that.
Paused that clip at 15 seconds. Bartender gives another beer to Mr. Anderson.
That is correct, yes.
I think it's the weather station because I have so I think what I do is when I put socks, I vaseline wrap on my hand and I put socks on. So I look at a newer maybe and I go, oh, it's good weather. And I'm like, I still end up watching it.
All right, that clip ended. I was trying to stop it right at the end here, but. Somewhere just prior to 6:03 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And so Mr. Anderson got another beer, and then it looks like the bartender does what?
He goes and obtains their check.
So to this point, and I know we didn't watch all of the clips, but you've watched all of them, right?
That's correct, yes.
How he's had 2 beers and a shot, is that fair?
That's fair, yes.
And Miss Robinson, 1 drink and a shot?
That's fair to say, yes.
Were there more drinks ordered, do you recall?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Next clip picks up at what time?
That's 18:02 hours with 50 seconds, which is 6:02 p.m.
It's right where the last one left off.
That is correct.
Paused at 22 seconds in this first part of the clip. It looks like Mr. Calvert and Mr. Anderson do like a fist bump, right?
Correct, yes.
And then it seems he's offering up another shot, correct?
Correct.
How does Sade respond to that?
I believe she...
That we just saw.
I believe she declines it.
Okay, I'll play it again. I'm going back to 9 seconds. Paused at 32 seconds. Were you able to tell there?
Yeah, so it appears that the bartender puts down 2 shot glasses, and when he puts down the shot glass in front of Miss Robinson, she kind of makes like a right hand motion indicating that she's declining it.
And what does the bartender do with the shot glass?
I believe, I'm not exactly sure what he did with hers.
Okay, I'll back it up here. Playing from 12 seconds. Did you see it there?
I did, yes. He physically picks up the shot glass and puts it in front of Mr. Anderson.
Playing at 26.
Yeah, actually, I can make you all Charlie Fisher shot. Go on? Okay, just gonna take a I go, they're like water in Milwaukee, and so, yeah.
All right, I paused it just before the end of the clip. The timestamp is what?
18:04 hours and 52 seconds.
Okay, sorry, I pulled it away before you could read it. The next clip picks up at what time?
18:04 hours and 54 seconds.
Cheers. So very nice to meet you. Maxwell, pleasure to see you. Like I said, I talked to you on the phone. But I was doing this. Not bad, huh? Yeah, yeah. Young ladies, who's gonna say right here?
All right, and in that clip that just ended, that was about a 2-minute clip, give or take. What did we observe?
Observed the bartender make some type of alcoholic beverage, and then the 3 of them, he pours the beverage into 3 shot glasses, and the 3 of them do the shot together.
Okay, so he gives that shot to both Sade and Mr. Anderson.
That's correct, yes.
I'm gonna advance a little bit here. Next clip picks up at, what time do we got?
18:21 hours and 16 seconds.
All right, so just a few minutes after they just did the other shot?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that clip looks like they're getting up to leave.
That's correct, yes.
I'm gonna go to the next clip. Does this one pick up right where the other one just left off, or at least appear to?
That's correct, yes, at 18:23 hours and 21 seconds.
Pause this clip at 1 minute and 3 seconds in. The timestamp is 18:24:25. They've just headed for the exit, right?
That's correct. They say bye to the bartender, and they both exit the establishment together.
Okay. This video's titled Leaving Twisted Fisherman. What camera are we looking at here?
We're looking at the exit/entrance camera to the east, which shows out towards the parking lot.
And the timestamp, April 1st, 2024, what time?
18:24 hours and 20 seconds.
In that clip, they leave, they're exiting to the east, and then they turn the corner of the building, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So in some, Detective Mr. Anderson arrives at about 5:09 p.m.
Correct.
Miss Robinson at roughly 5:20.
Correct, yes.
They sit there next to each other at the bar.
Correct.
They eat.
Correct.
They have drinks.
Correct.
And 2 shots total.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And at 6:24, they get up and leave together.
That is correct, yes.
Did you have another detective check and see if there was other video of them leaving near the We Energies facilities near that location?
That is correct. That was Detective Joe Blanchard.
Okay. And then I have Exhibit 240, which has already been entered into evidence. This is a screenshot from that same camera. What is Sade wearing?
Sade is wearing a black puffer jacket. Underneath appears to be a white knitted sweatshirt, blue/white wash jeans with cuts towards the knees and the thigh of her body, and then white, I would say, tennis shoes. She's also appears to be carrying a black bag in her left hand.
Okay. And when she's inside, she has her jacket off. You can see that she's wearing the long sleeve sweater.
That is correct, yes.
And it kind of goes midway down her torso.
That is correct, yes.
I have no other questions.
Cross.
So just to recap, the two of them basically just hung out at Twisted Fisherman.
I would classify that as yes. They just had casual conversation from what it appeared.
And the guy you mentioned before is named Brian Culvert, right? That's somebody you talked about?
That's correct, yes.
Because you questioned him?
I interviewed him.
And he's the guy that was working behind the bar?
Correct, yes.
You've watched all these tapes before court here today, obviously, on other occasions.
That's correct, yes.
And Mr. Culvert appears friendly with Max Anderson, doesn't he?
That is correct, yes.
Calls him an incredible guy.
I don't recall hearing that.
Well, at the end, he says, Max, so good to see you, as he's shaking his hand and leaning across the bar. You saw that?
I saw that. I didn't hear that.
Oh, you didn't hear either of those things?
I heard the name Max. I didn't hear the incredible guy portion.
Okay. Who carded Sade?
I don't believe she was carded.
Did they ever ask her age or anything?
Objection, relevance.
Well, they just spent all this time talking about shots.
It's fine.
I'll withdraw the objection.
Allow him to answer. Go ahead.
Could you just ask your question one more time?
Was she carded?
I don't believe so.
Or asked to provide any identification at all from what you saw?
From what I saw, I don't believe so.
And it looks to me like Brian Culvert is just on his own pouring shots for people.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning at this point. If we're getting into him serving her underage, it's not relevant to this trial at all.
It isn't relevant. I mean, you got in the part relative to the alcohol.
Well, you've testified on direct about shots being poured, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And my question about the shots, not about the underage aspect, my question about the shots is, did Max order those shots?
I don't know who ordered what shots.
Right. You don't hear anybody order those shots.
I don't believe so.
From what it appears, from what you watched, is that the bartender is just pouring them on his own volition, right?
That's correct. But again, I can hear some of the audio in the video. I can't hear all the audio in the video.
Right. Okay. And they eat a meal, right?
Correct, yes.
Each of them, from what you can tell?
From what I can tell, yes.
And it's clear to you, isn't it, that Max is known at this Twisted Fisherman place, right?
Yeah, it appears that him and the bartender know each other, yes.
Very friendly with each other.
I would say so, yes.
That's all.
State anything?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
State your next witness.
I'm going to recall Detective Blanchard.
you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You can please be seated, restate, and respell your name for the record, please.
Joseph Blanchard, Joseph Blanchard, Blanchar.
Detective Blanchard, you assisted in this investigation also by trying to get video from We Energies down in the valley, correct?
That is correct.
And if you look to your right on the screen, were you aware that there was video recovered from Twisted Fisherman depicting Sade and Maxwell Anderson being at that establishment?
Yes.
Did you subsequently obtain video footage from We Energies showing the approximate arrivals and departures of those people?
I did, yes.
I'm going to pull up, this is Exhibit 236. There were multiple camera angles from We Energies that you found, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Exhibit 236, the first clip I have up is titled uberdrop.mov. What are we looking at here?
It is a western view of the camera on, I believe, St. Paul. I'm not sure what 100 block that would be, exactly where the camera is, but it's right in front of the Twisted Fisherman, which the structure is right on our right. It's like a beige structure.
Okay, so where I'm circling here, that would be Twisted Fisherman?
Yes, that's correct.
We got Potawatomi over here on the left that I'm circling now?
Yes.
Okay, and this video clip is going to show what in sum?
A vehicle arriving and pulling just into the front of the driveway of Twisted Fisherman, which is that first access point, stops there and then slowly rolls forward straight to the west entrance. That's the area of the west entrance of Twisted Fisherman.
Do you recall what time this clip is from?
Yes, it's from the 1st of April, 5:09 hours, and I believe there is a timestamp embedded in the video if you need help finding it.
Okay, and that vehicle that we just watched pull in, that's the Uber you're talking about?
Yes, looks like a SUV of some sort.
Right here that I'm circling?
Correct.
Okay. And I would move the entirety of 236 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
It's received.
I played that clip to 19 seconds. I'm going to go to the next clip. What are we looking at here?
This is a different angle. Right on top of the screen is the east side exit and entrance area of Twisted Fisherman with a parking lot that is adjacent to it.
This clip is from what time on April 1st?
Around 5:09 on the other side. I believe it's 6:24.
Okay.
About, I believe, when this is the exit.
You were aware of what time they were on video coming and going, right?
Yes.
Okay. So where do we want to be looking? All right, right where I'm circling here?
Yes, at the top of the screen, right in the center. Behind that vehicle is a chain link fence.
The video kind of skips, but we can see what?
Two individuals exiting the east side of the Twisted Fisherman.
And then they go around the front of the building?
They do.
Are you aware from the Twisted Fisherman who those individuals are?
I am, yes.
Who are they?
Sade Robinson and Maxwell Anderson.
Back to this other clip. This is them walking outside the restaurant together.
Yep, now along the west, walking westward direction in front of the building.
And they appear to be walking together, leaving the restaurant together.
Yes.
Where are they walking to?
The west side parking lot where Sade's vehicle was parked.
Okay. And last clip, I'm sorry, I didn't announce the time that I stopped that one. All right, I'm stopping it at 44 seconds. So right here where I'm circling, there's some trees and whatnot. Do you know from other angles if that's where her car is parked?
From looking at this video and seeing some small movement behind the trees, the vehicle was parked there.
Okay, and then let's go to the final clip. Different angle, but in this one you can actually see where her car is parked, correct?
Correct.
I'm gonna zoom in. I'm circling right here, two people, that'd be Sade and Mr. Anderson?
Correct, leaving the restaurant, excuse me.
All right. Playing from 0 minutes, 0 seconds. It kind of skips, correct?
It does.
But you can see them walking together?
Yes.
All right, and right here where I'm circling, what's that?
That is her vehicle parked facing the direction of the camera.
Do they appear to both get in the vehicle?
They do.
And what time was that at?
About 6:24 or 5 at that time.
So the Uber drop-off was at 5:09. They were in the restaurant. They left at 6:24, both going towards Sade Robinson's car.
That is correct.
Nothing else.
Defense?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
State your next witness.
State calls Russell Davis.
Sir, if you could just remain standing and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Okay, if you can please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
Russell Davis, spelled Russell-Davis.
Mr. Davis, are you associated with the restaurant Twisted Fisherman?
I am, yes.
How?
I am the sole member, owner of the LLC, Twisted Fisherman,
Where is that located?
at 1200 West Canal Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
At some point in time, did you employ someone named Maxwell Anderson?
Yes, for approximately 3 weeks in 2023.
Do you see that person in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you describe where they're sitting and what they're wearing, please?
They're sitting on my left side in the courtroom, wearing a green shirt and a white t-shirt.
I'd ask the record to reflect the identification of the defendant.
Any objection?
No.
The record will so reflect.
You employed him just for 3 weeks.
Approximately, yes.
How would you describe the level of your knowledge of him?
Very brief knowledge.
At some point on April 5th, 2024, did the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office come to the Twisted Fisherman?
Yes, they did.
And did you assist them with obtaining surveillance footage from the Twisted Fisherman?
Yes, I did.
Did you also view that video while you were helping the detectives with it?
Yes, somewhat.
And in that video, did you see Maxwell Anderson depicted?
Yes,
And was that from the date of April 1st, 2024?
it was.
I'm showing you what's been marked Exhibit 241 and previously received. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
And who is that depicted in that photo?
Maxwell Anderson.
And is that the outside of the Twisted Fisherman?
Yes, it is.
Were you asked to view any other photographs by members of the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, there was a picture on a bus as well.
Showing you what's been marked Exhibit 204. Does that look familiar?
Yes,
Who is that?
Maxwell Anderson.
Nothing further.
Defense?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, you may step down. State your next witness.
Judge, would it be possible to take a 5-minute recess?
Sure. Please leave your notebooks on your chair. We'll be back with you very quickly. Thank you, everybody.
There we go. Now you can hear me now. Brian Polson here at the Wisconsin Live Desk. We are in a brief recess, about a 5-minute recess, the Maxwell Anderson trial. We just heard from and saw a video from the inside of Twisted Fisherman and outside of Twisted Fisherman along Canal Street in Milwaukee. That is in the Menominee River Valley, which is down by Potawatomi Casino and obviously a little bit west of American Family Field, if you're familiar with that part of the city. We saw where the start of the date occurred between Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson. I see the judge is on the bench. She may have some questions and or comments for attorneys before they break. Nope. Okay, now she's gone again. So we're seeing what you have to remember at times is many of us have seen these images from inside, or at least still photos from inside Twisted Fisherman, where Maxwell Anderson is seated to the left, Sade Robinson to the right. They're there enjoying. There's a photo of the two of them sitting together at the bar, apparently having a first date. The bartender is there interacting with them. He gives them a couple of shots. We've seen this photograph, or one very similar to it, several times before, but the jury hasn't. This is their first opportunity to see the two of them sitting side by side on bar stools hours before Sade Robinson would go missing, and about a day before her body parts would start to surface. The first one, of course, along the shores of Lake Michigan in Cudahy. So we see what occurs there, which is they have some food, they have a couple of shots, they have a drink or two, and then they leave together. And this is the first time we saw the surveillance video outside, which actually showed the two of them walking out of the building, around the corner of the building, into a parking lot, and then getting into a vehicle together. It was small, it was kind of grainy in the distance, but it appeared very clear that those same two figures who left together were the ones that got into that car. The defense did not object to the state's characterization of that. So it seems clear that there is agreement, stipulation, that in fact Sade and Maxwell Anderson left the bar together, got in Sade Robinson's car together, and left from there. We now have the owner of Twisted Fisherman who is on the stand. You saw that the owner positively identified Maxwell Anderson from one of the photos from that video, from his own surveillance system as he came, and that's it right there. He's walking in the door wearing that hoodie. He has his hair in what would be commonly described as a man bun, wearing dark pants, the dark t-shirt. And then he heads inside. We see Sade Robinson as she arrives. She is wearing the light-colored stonewashed blue jeans with holes in the knees and the thighs, and is wearing a jacket with a white sweater underneath. That comes into play later. Of course, the jury's already seen this, but we saw that when the car fire was set, when her car was set ablaze on the north side of Milwaukee, there was clothing in the trunk. That clothing included light-colored stonewashed jeans with holes in them, similar to what was described there. The state said it's the same clothing that she was wearing on her date with Maxwell Anderson, among other things that were in that trunk. We also heard in the last several minutes from Detective Joanne Donner, who made her third appearance on the stand. She talked about going down to Waukegan, Illinois, to collect DNA from the arm that had washed ashore there so that they could match that to the remains of Sade Robinson. And in fact, ultimately, they did get a positive match. We also heard once again, for the third time, from John Galat, Milwaukee police detective, who was presenting some of that video evidence that we just talked about from inside Twisted Fisherman. I suspect where we're going to go next is where they went next, and that is to Duke's on Water, which is a bar in downtown Milwaukee. Whatever surveillance video or images have been collected there is likely where we're going to be seeing the state go after they are finished with Russell Davis, the owner of Twisted Fisherman. They've taken a brief break and will be coming back momentarily. And we will take a break here right now and come back right after this.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson here at the Wisconsin Live Desk. It is 3:55 on Monday afternoon. We are late in the day of the 5th day of the Maxwell Anderson trial, 4th day of testimony. We are going to be here. The court is in a brief recess. If they come back in the next few minutes, we may take you back out there shortly, but we're going to be here coming out of this pretty quickly as we head into the 4 o'clock news. You'll see Fox 6 News at 4 on our primary stream. But if you want to keep watching testimony through the end of the day, you can watch on the Fox 6 News Milwaukee YouTube channel, and you can get that link by going to Fox Local. So you can watch the trial, you can watch it uninterrupted there. But if you want to watch our news coverage of what's happened so far today, you can stick right here on this stream with Fox 6 News at 4, 5, and 6. You'll also see Fox 6 News at 9 and 10, and get all of the basically the breakdown, the analysis, the basics of what has happened so far today. We have seen up until now, looks like 10 witnesses who have testified today. A couple have appeared twice. One of them, John Galat, detective, has been called a couple of times to talk about a variety of things, most recently that surveillance video inside Twisted Fisherman. Probably one of the more interesting characters on the stand today was Pete Warbington. Pete Warbington was the tenant who lived downstairs in Maxwell Anderson's home at 3161 South 39th Street in Milwaukee. He testified to not having heard anything in the middle of the night that this all allegedly happened. He didn't hear any loud noises. He didn't hear a struggle. He didn't hear anything that sounded like saws or screams, power tools, anything like that. He says he's a light sleeper and he would have heard it. He would have been a defense witness. The state called him, perhaps strategically, on their own to ask some questions of their own. I don't see the court coming back in. With just a couple of minutes left, I'm probably going to carry you right up to 4 o'clock when the news begins here, and then you can go watch the rest of the afternoon, which will probably go another 45 minutes or so, maybe up to an hour, on the Fox 6 News Milwaukee YouTube stream. Again, the first person, Pete Warbington, he talked about Maxwell Anderson and knowing the family going way back, because Maxwell Anderson's dad was his Little League baseball coach. But Warbington says he left Milwaukee, left Wisconsin, was gone for 18 years, and came back a couple of years ago needing a place to stay, to be closer to work in Milwaukee. He saw that Anderson had listed a place for rent, and so he checked in, inquired about it, and said the price was right. It was $1,000 a month, and his landlord, Max Anderson, he said, was flexible with when and how he paid him, so it was a good fit for him. That said, he seemed to have some personality conflicts with his landlord. He actually called him, quote, an insufferable landlord. Said that he didn't fix a lot of things, he wasn't very responsive, talked about making a lot of noise, having people over after his bartending shifts, and making a lot of noise into the middle of the night. One of the reasons, he said, he knew he could hear everything upstairs as Warbington lived downstairs. The key for the defense is that Warbington said he couldn't hear anything that sounded like someone being murdered upstairs the night that this happened. And of course, prosecutors have painted the picture that that's where Sade Robinson and Maxwell Anderson went after their date and before he drove the car over to the Lake Michigan shoreline in Cudahy in Warnemont Park. We've got about a minute to go before we bring you Fox 6 News at 4 o'clock. After Pete Warbington this morning, we heard the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office talking about the remains of Sade Robinson and their difficulty in determining exactly what weapon or tool or anything may have been used to kill and then to dismember her body. They did describe the possibility of knives being used, the possibility of a blunt force instrument, no clear evidence of power tools, but in the end, the medical examiner who was interviewed said she could not say or could not draw any conclusion about who did it, where it happened, or even how it happened. Obviously, that is a big hole in the state's case right now and something that the defense is trying to emphasize. We're going to wrap up here and take you to Fox 6 News at 4 again.